Light heavyweight? Light heavyweight or lightweight? Okay, I guess lightweight.
We're at light heavyweight.
If it doesn't work, then you can just check up on Twitch because I'm live.
Alright, I'm gonna fuck you up at lightweight though.
Indeed. What, with my Ali Bogov or no?
Sure.
Toto, we live?
Well,
Oh, no, we're just talking.
Yeah, we're live.
All right. Okay.
Dan, do you
So-
want to talk?
All right.
Okay. So the argument kind of goes like this, right? So
Okay.
change is a real feature of the world. And then
Okay.
I define change as the actualization of potential. So something is potentially there, but is not actually there. And potential on its own doesn't really have any sort of power to do anything. So potential can only be actualized only if there is something already actual that actualizes. This is just the principle of causality. And so any change is caused by something already actual. And so I'm going to be calling change, we'll call it C, and we'll be calling the thing that changes S. And so any change presupposes the existence of S. And so this existence needs to be actualized. And this actualizer, we can call it A. And so A's own existence, at the moment it actualizes the thing that is being changed to S, itself presupposes either the concurrent actualization of its own potential for existence, as in it has something actualizing its own existence, or A being something purely actual, something that exists of its own foundation for existence. Now, if A's existence at the moment it actualizes the substance S presupposes that it is being actualized by something else, then there exists a regress of concurrent actualizers that is either infinite or terminates in a purely actual actualizer. But such a regress of concurrent actualizers would constitute what I'd call an essentially causal series, which I can. So either A itself is a purely actual actualizer, or there is a purely actual actualizer, which terminates the regress that begins with the actualization of the initial actualizer. And so the occurrence of change C, and thus the existence of substance S at any given moment, presupposes the existence of a purely actual actualizer. So there exists a purely actualizer. Now I can get into a little bit more of the hierarchical series, if that's because that's kind of might require some sort of elaboration.
Yeah, two things. Firstly, are you able to write this down? Because, like, you know, that's the mouthful.
Yeah,
so I just want to like track it premise with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay.
I can,
And then,
I can just copy it.
Actually, yeah, just tell me when you're done with that. That's fine. Jesus.
It is
fucking
That's kind of why I was somewhat worried about bringing this up right here. Copy. Okay, I just put it in the chat. I probably should label the premises, might be, but I can get into kind of like the nitty gritty of like the nature of a hierarchical series, if you'd like.
So I don't know, I'm just trying to like figure out what the ultimate inference is here. So
Yeah.
you're saying that for there to be some sort of actual actualizer, or I guess the equivalent would be like the weird like unmoved mover kind of thing, right? Is that what you're discussing? Just real quick.
The goal was is to prove something, an unactualized actualizer. Yeah.
Right. And so then in that case, right, I mean, I think this is just similar to other forms of cosmological arguments. And then I guess my question, I mean, I could get into the objections to like different types of cosmological arguments. I'm not familiar with the Aristotelian cosmological argument, but I guess my question would just be, at what point from that argument do we then derive that there's some God, right? So by God, I assume that you take it to be like the three omnis, right? Omnibenevolent, omnipotent, omniscient, correct?
Yes.
Right. So how do we derive that from this argument?
So, okay. So for now, are we supposing, like, I know you're not seeding this, but are we supposing that the argument is sound up until there is a purely actual actualizer so that I can get into?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, if there is more than, so this is first establishing monotheism. If there was more than one pure actualizer, there would have to be some sort of differentiating feature that one such actualizer has that the others lack. But there could be such a differentiating feature only if a purely actualizer had some unactualized potential but that cannot be the case because it is purely actual. So there can't be a differentiating feature, and thus there's only one purely actual actualizer. Now, in order for it capable of change, it would have to have potentials capable of actualization, but it's purely actual, so it cannot have change. Now, if it existed in time, it would be capable of change, which it is not. So it is eternal and existing outside of time. If the purely actual actualizer were material, then it would be changeable and exist in time, which it is not. So it is immaterial. If it was corporeal, then it would be material, which it is not. So it's incorporeal. If the purely actual actualizer was imperfect in any way, it would have some unactualized potential, which being purely actual does not. So it is perfect. For something to be less than fully good is for it to have a privation. That is, to fail to actualize feature proper to it. A purely actual actualizer, being purely actual, can have no such privation, so it is fully good. To have power entails being able to actualize potentials. And again, I can also copy this, although this is a lot longer.
Right.
And so any potential that is actualized is either actualized by the purely actual actualizer or by a series of actualizers, which terminates the purely actual actualizer. So all power from the purely actual actualizer is derived. Oh no, all power. So my bad. All power is derived from the purely actual actualizer because the purely actual actualizer is what gives everything its existence. But that's just what it means to be omnipotent. To be the derivation of all power. So the purely actual actualizer is omnipotent. And whatever is in effect is in its cause. It is in its cause in some way, whether formally, virtually, or eminently. This is the principle of proportionate causality. So the purely actualizer is the cause of all things. And this kind of pattern just kind of goes on in regards to intellect, right? So like in terms of like if you don't have these forms or patterns can exist either in the concrete way in which they exist in an individual particular things, or in the abstract way in which they exist in the thoughts of an intellect. They cannot exist in the purely actual actualizer in the same way they exist in individual particular things. So they must exist in the purely actual actualizer in the abstract way in which they exist in the thoughts of an intellect. So they have intellect. Since forms or patterns of all things that are in the thoughts of this intellect, there's nothing that is outside the range of those thoughts, which means that they are omniscient, which means because if there's nothing outside the range of those thoughts, that means everything is within the range of those thoughts. Therefore, all intellect is within the range of the thoughts of the purely actual actualizer. And so we've established that they are immutable, immaterial, incorporeal, perfect, fully good, omnipotent, intelligent, and omniscient, which is just God.
Okay. So wait, hold on. So you said incorporeal, right? So you mean like immaterial, something that's non-physical. Am I correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
So typically when we discuss God, we discuss them as not being concrete, right? Not a concrete entity that exists as a particular in the universe, I suppose. Now, if they did exist in the universe in time, well, that implies that they are capable of change. But it's not just that they don't change; it's that they are incapable of it because they are purely actual and thus cannot actualize any potentials. And so, as such, they would have to be immaterial.
Wait, so what do you mean by immaterial though? Like, do you mean lacking material relation?
I mean, I think I would just use like something sort of similar, like the notion of like a universal, I suppose, like something that does not exist with material.
Okay, so then if it doesn't exist like with material, I presume that means it's without material relation, sans material relation. So my question would then be, how is it acting upon the material world, right? How is something initiating and acting upon the material world if it's the case that this thing that's supposedly immaterial is somehow acting upon the immaterial world? Like, how does that work?
I'm kind of confused as to what your question necessarily is, from being
So
completely.
how does something immaterial act upon the material? If it's defined as without material relations, how is it engaging material relation?
I would define it as necessarily like as it lacks material relations. I would just say that it is not material. It in itself is not material.
Right. And so I guess I'm trying to figure out what that means, right? Because like when we define what an abstract object is normally, we define it in terms of lacking a particular type of like relation, right? So we're saying something's concrete, that normally means it engages in causal relation. When something isn't concrete, it seems to be absent of causal relation. So when we're saying that something is material, I imagine that it's a similar notion, right? It either has or possesses some sort of material relation, or it lacks it altogether. So I mean,
Ooh,
if that's not
okay.
your definition, I guess I'm trying to figure out what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Here.
Okay. So I would typically just say it's not physical. So this is kind of relating to like scholastic metaphysics. So one aspect of scholastic metaphysics is something called hylomorphism, in which there exists a form in matter in everything, and the form in itself is immaterial. However, the form is still what the matter is actualizing. It's the potential that the matter is actualizing. It is the shape, the function of the thing. And so it's sort of like a similar sense to that, in which the material certainly interacts with the form, the immaterial, but it's just not in itself material. It's something that allows the material to be given existence, I suppose.
So if you're saying it's like hylomorphic, I mean, I haven't really studied like
No,
hylomorphism.
it's not necessarily hylomorphic. I was just
Oh,
giving
okay.
an aspect of scholastic metaphysics in which like it's an example of how something immaterial still interacts with the material world.
So like, I guess I'm just trying to pinpoint what your definition is, and I feel like at least for me so far, I haven't been able to find a definition that I completely understand. So when you say that it's just not material, like I grant that, right? Like I think like that's a given when you say something's immaterial, right? That's a given the prefix and then what material means. But I guess we're trying to figure out like what does it mean to not be material. And so I'm saying like that seems to imply that there's an absence of a type of relation, in this case material relation. So if that's the case, right, and it's engaging simultaneously in material relation, which is what the agent you're describing would be doing, yet simultaneously is like immaterial, it seems as if somehow you've arrived at a contradiction. I guess I'm just trying to resolve that, right? I don't want to accuse you of committing some sort of contradiction via like the implication of your argument if that's not even your definition. So I guess I'm trying to figure out what do you mean by something being not material? Like what does that mean?
Uh, I don't. I feel like it's somewhat clear, if I'm being completely honest. I'm not entirely sure where the objection like truly is, but I would say I would just define it as something not physical. I'm not really
Right.
sure how else to uh, expand upon that, I suppose.
Okay, so like in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, right? There are different definitions for what it means for something to be abstract. And what that can mean is like a couple of things. It can mean lacking some sort of indeterminate, like spatio-temporal location. It could mean lacking space-time presence altogether. It could mean having some weird form of spatio-temporal location that's inaccessible. It can mean a couple of things, right? And so it seems like when you're talking about God, that's what you're getting at. So if God falls into the initial definition of being something that is without space-time presence altogether, it doesn't make sense that he's at the source of space-time. Now, if what you're saying is that God actually does have some sort of spatio-temporal presence, then it seems like there's an issue on your view, because you were saying a moment ago that you don't want God to be material because that produces a set of problems. So it seems like we're at a bit of an impasse via the implications of this kind of argument. And so I'm confused as to whether or not it entails a contradiction or whether or not it entails some sort of explanatory issue.
I'm not sure if it would entail a contradiction, because
Mm-hmm.
I would say that, like, okay, when we discuss the nature of like a purely actualizer, this is just in a sense like existence in the simplest of forms, I suppose. I'm just trying to explain at this point, like to further elaborate, because I feel like that's the nature of the issue. But essentially, like so it's just kind of like actualizing the highest order possible. And so it's like it's just the fullest instantiation of being,
Right.
and serving the ultimate causal power of things. it would seem as though like them being the highest order of existence would allow them to then I suppose interact with the rest of existence, lower orders of existence, I suppose.
Right. So, okay. So by immaterial now, you just mean it has some higher order of like existence or something? Is that what
Well,
we're saying now?
That's the
Or
nature
that's just
of
an
a
aspect?
purely actual. That's just the nature of a purely actual actualizer. If I'm being completely honest, I'm not entirely sure like where the objection.
So like
I feel like this is just an explanatory issue on my part,
Sure.
or maybe it's just an issue in regards to like
yeah, I can
how we view
explain
these
further.
concepts.
So okay, so when we're talking about abstract versus concrete objects, right? And I can I'm playing a game right now, but if you want me to, I can get you the article afterwards. But when we're talking about abstract versus concrete objects, the distinction that's made is the presence of causal relation. So when you're saying that, for instance, something is concrete, that's defined in terms of having causal relations, right? So someone might say something like the laws of logic are abstract; they're lacking in causal relation. They don't actually have any sort of spatiotemporal context or spatiotemporal presence. What they function as is these abstract laws in the same way that we consider like platonic mathematical objects do, right? So they're abstractions. They're mind independent, but they're at the same time like abstract. And obviously, certain people like have a similar view of like the mind. Some people don't consider the mind physical. That's what a lot of religious people say. They think like the like mind is like a soul, which is this non-natural, immaterial kind of thing. And that seems to mean, right, that it's lacking in causality. It's lacking in temporal relation. Well, I guess more precisely, causal relation, right? And that's why when we're talking in philosophy of mind about free will versus determinism, that's where that comes from, right? Determinism is merely the thesis that we have physical bodies and physical minds that are subject to a causal relation, whereas the idea or notion of free will originally was supposed to be predicated upon there not being any sort of naturality to it, it being some type of soul or some kind of spirit or something along those lines. Not as absurd as that, but I'm trying to make the point a little more illustratively. So basically, what I'm getting at is if God is suffering this problem, this falls into the same problem that's been actually talked about before. It's called the interaction problem. So if it's the case that God is defined as immaterial, it doesn't make sense for him to engage in material relation unless what you mean by material is simply that God has some aspect of indeterminate materiality. But then it seems like it falls back into this problem you were talking about earlier, where you're saying that material things actually suffer from this actualization problem. And so that's what I'm saying. I'm saying like if God is this weird spiritual thing that doesn't exist and abide to a physical realm, right? Then it's bizarre to consider the idea that he then governs a physical realm because he would be defined in terms of lacking those kinds of relations.
So okay, I think I kind of get like where you're getting. I think I just kind of I think this is mostly my issue in terms of elaboration. So I would define immaterial as as just lacking material form. I suppose as in not impacted by things that that a material object would be impacted by.
Okay,
I don't know if that helps clear things up.
Yeah, I think that's getting to the core of my objection. All right, so then at that point, my question would be: if it lacks material form, that's like saying it lacks a spatiotemporal location. So how can something not even like in the territory of space-time affect space-time?
So I feel like okay. Could you elaborate as to like why that might be an issue though? Because like just because I don't know if it would this is a very like a nuance.
Yeah.
But so like why would that necessarily I suppose limit?
You're not like a dialetheist, right?
What was that?
You're not a dialetheist, correct?
I don't think I am. I don't know what that is.
Like you don't believe that there are real contradictions, like the law of non-contradiction has exceptions?
I don't think that. I think I don't think the law of non-contradiction has exceptions. No.
Okay, so then what I'm getting at is what's called the interaction problem. This is more typical in the philosophy of mind, but it's something that's been wagered against religious people before who run these kinds of arguments. Basically, the consideration being made here is that if we're defining, for instance, something being incapable of causal relation, or in this case, lacking a material form, right? If it lacks those aspects and those properties, but then it seems to exhibit those aspects and properties functionally in order to begin things like space-time, or in the case of philosophy of mind, the soul doesn't have these properties of function up until, for whatever reason, it does. It seems as if we're in a contradiction, right? It's like, yeah, it lacks these relations except when it does, because their definition is just lacking those relations or those properties, and yet they suddenly do.
Okay, so I'm trying to think, like, essentially where the objection is necessarily coming from. I feel like when we're discussing something immaterial, I feel like it's necessarily an aspect of the material and impacting what is material. So, like, I would say that something like red is immaterial, right? I don't think red is a material thing, but but that still impacts, like, it still impacts or see the material world. So I'm just somewhat confused as to why something being immaterial would necessarily mean that it cannot impact material.
Well, it depends. So when you're saying the concept of red is immaterial, right? That seems to more so suit the definition I was talking about earlier, an indeterminate space-time presence, right? And so an equivalence might be the game of chess, right? The game of chess doesn't exist literally on my desk, right? But the game of chess exists as a concept which can be instantiated by my desk, or a board game sitting on my desk. And we could do the same with like franchises, whatever anime you want. That doesn't have some particular existence on my desk that has more of a conceptual existence. But that gets into the nature of philosophy of mind, and we could actually just very quickly say that we might make an appeal to something like a Leibnizian view of like the mind, which is to say that we think the mind is immaterial, and that there aren't actually material relations like that actually impact our mind. There's merely the appearance of them. So the analogy that Leibniz gives is if we have two clocks that are perfectly in sync, it doesn't mean they impact each other. It might seem like there's some sort of deeper connection, but there really isn't.
Okay. So
yeah.
So you're just saying that, like, if it is the case that they're immaterial, then it would be as though the material world doesn't actually exist.
I would go so far as to say that if you're saying that God is immaterial, that implies causal and efficacy, which is to say that it doesn't make sense to say that God, that's quote unquote immaterial, has made the world if making something implies change, and change or transformation implies causality or causal efficacy. If he's defined in terms of lacking causal properties, but then he's engaging. Okay, there we go.
Okay, wait. So I'm not even saying that he's necessarily creating anything like the world. So the nature of this argument deals a lot more with something of the the sense of sustainment rather than it does creation.
Okay, so he's sustaining it?
Yeah, he's sustaining the world in the sense that he is pure existence, and which every other thing is incapable of deriving their ability to be actualized, the ability for their existence to be actualized. He is, because the nature of the argument, right, is that something, in order to exist in the sense that I described in a actually ordered series, there needs to be something that is so fundamental to existence that it has the ability to exist imparted in it by its very nature. And this cannot be explained via any material thing, and so the purely actual being would literally just be existence itself, as in just it would be existence in which it is able to then imparts causal power for everything else that exists. And this is typically how God is seen in the classical theistic sense.
Yo, Trini, just real quick, I'm gonna eat dinner, so I'm not gonna
I'm
play for a
gonna
little
knock
bit.
you out. Yeah, I'm gonna knock you out real quick then. Okay. Okay.
So
Hold on.
yeah,
I was gonna say.
I think
Yeah.
maybe
If
I
you're
think maybe it would help. I think maybe it'd help
Uh-huh.
if like further elaborate on the nature of the argument itself and just
Well,
establish
I was
the
just gonna.
actualizer.
Yeah, I was
Oh,
gonna
sorry.
ask a question, and then you can just tell me whether or not this is applicable. So
Okay.
you're saying that there's an interaction between God and what we consider to be the universe or the cosmos or what have you, or just materiality as a whole. There's some level of interaction, right?
Um.
Or
I,
no?
so okay, this is a really nuanced question. I feel like in my interpretation of things and regarding the classical theism, um, I suppose, I mean, if you want to say that like the highest order of the pure existence has a relation with the rest of material, I suppose you'd be saying that. I feel like
Wait, ask it again.
it's somewhat difficult for me to explain this. So okay, if you're asking like whether or not existence has a relationship with like pure existence, pure actuality, something that has existence built into the very nature of the thing, such that it doesn't need anything to impart existence upon it. Then if you, I don't know if that would necessarily have what I would call a relation.
Okay.
It's somewhat difficult for me to answer that. Because like I don't know if existence necessarily has relations with things, but I guess you know what, I think in this sense he probably, yeah, I think probably.
Okay, so you would say yes?
I think for now, yes, I would.
Okay. Yeah, and then I would just explain that it seems like it's engaging a material relation in spite of being called immaterial, which seems to mean that it lacks material relation. So I would say the contradiction is that it has and is not supposed to have material relation, right? We have a rule and then we have a defiance of that rule, but the rule is just something that's governed by its very definition, or rather by the description and what the definition of that description implies.
Okay. So when we discuss like the nature of like why a purely actual being, and I don't know if this helps like elaborate, but I'm just gonna get into
Okay.
it.
Yeah, no,
When we discuss the nature of like a purely actual being, what we're essentially discussing is that like what let's say we take a cup of coffee, right? And the
Right.
cup of coffee exists on the table. We would need to explain why necessarily this cup of coffee exists at the moment that it does, right? And so
Right.
we can get into like the fact that, oh well, the cup of coffee existed on the table because somebody poured hot water into some coffee grounds, but that doesn't necessarily like explain what keeps in existence. um and because like I mean the chemistry of the water has the potential to be distinct quantities of hydrogen and oxygen, but that's not what is being actualized at the moment. Rather, it is the potential to be water that is actualized by the hydrogen and oxygen molecules. And so, and I mean, we can talk the chemical process for how it got in, how it became water, but that only tells us how it got into like how it got into the state that it's in, not what keeps it in existence. We might discuss that like nothing has come along to separate the hydrogen and oxygen, but that only tells us how it might one day go out of existence, not why it is here now.
Right.
And if we talk about like the subatomic nature of it, this only pushes the question back further, as like what is it that actualizes the potential for the structure of the atoms to be arranged in such a way. And so it seems as though like the answer, at least in my view, would be that there must be something that has its own I suppose causal power that does not have its causal power imparted on it by a previous thing, and that has to have the causal power built in. And so the first member of this hierarchical series that we discussed must have the ability to grant the power of existence while having this power for itself built in. That would just literally be existence itself at this point, and a purely actual being, which we would then discuss as God, for the nature that for the reason I brought up. And so I'm not entirely sure. Like, it's somewhat difficult for me to understand like the question of how existence impacts existence. I suppose, like, because I feel like that's a given almost.
Right. So you're saying there's something at the top of the food chain that's like maintaining everything. There's essentially like a cosmological maintenance guy, and that this cosmological maintenance guy has to have causal efficacy upon other things, but was not himself a causal result or causal consequence. That's what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Right. And so I guess what I'm trying to figure out is like what are the logistics of this thing lacking some sort of like causal antecedent, but then having like causal consequences, right? Or causal efficacy. Because if that's the case, right, that could be explained a number of ways. But the thing that I'm like just like I guess the thing that signaled a red light for me, or I guess like a big okay, I should probably talk about this is when you said immaterial. Because when you're saying he's immaterial, then it seems at that point, right, that this kind of entity is supposed to now be causally inefficacious. But if that's not what you're saying, then I guess I'm a little confused as to what the nature of this entity is. But it seems like you said that necessarily he has to be causally inefficacious, right? At least in terms of antecedents. But at the same time, he's somehow like capable of causal efficacy. He can cause things to happen while not himself being like caused by anything. So it seems like to me, I guess the easiest way to put it is you're just saying he's a causal, like he's an acausal, causally efficacious thing, or he's acausally causal, and that just seems really oxymoronic. Does that make sense?
So, I mean, that's kind of the nature of the argument, though, isn't it? Like an unactualized actualizer, something that has its ability imparted on it by the very nature of its being. But you're saying that something being unactualized and that being able to actualize something is not coherent?
It seems that per the description you've given of him being immaterial, I would say that at least that seemingly and strongly suggests a level of incoherence, simply due to the fact that he's supposed to lack causal efficacy yet still has it.
I mean, I'm not sure that I follow, because he lacks causal, like he lacks being caused, I suppose. But I'm not sure if he lacks I wouldn't say that he lacks the ability to invoke causality on other beings.
Okay.
I'm not sure where the contradiction in that lies.
Okay, so by material, you don't mean lacking in causal relation then?
It is able to. I mean, the very nature of existence, I believe, is able to impact existence.
Because if you're saying that he's immaterial, that means he lacks like material relation, right? But clearly he doesn't, because he's acting upon the material.
I'd
say
that he lacks material form.
So he lacks material form. So that's like saying something doesn't exist in time, right? But then it can act in time, right? Like that's like saying you're in my room and not in my room at the same time. I guess for everyone here is like kind of curious as to where this conversation has gone so far. Like that's what I'm getting at. You're saying that he has this feature, but he's defined as not having this feature, and that seems paradoxical.
Yeah. So when we just say something like being timeless, that mostly just means like not being impacted by time. Not necessarily. I wouldn't know if he necessarily. I wouldn't say he necessarily exists. Like when I say exists outside of time, I don't mean that he exists literally like outside of the very like fabric of reality, I suppose. Just that like he is timeless in the sense that he is not impacted like necessarily by time. He does not experience time, and this isn't even necessarily a radically interesting, like not radically I suppose incoherent idea, because like when we discuss something like light, even this came on. Light, anything that travels at the speed of light would necessarily not experience time or distance even in itself. And so I don't really think that's necessarily incoherent. It's just not being impacted by them, such that they are incapable of change.
Wait, so then you didn't mean to say that he was like material, at least, or immaterial, at least not in a literal sense. What you're instead trying to say is that he's just not caused by anything, right?
Unactualized, yeah.
Okay, sure. So then what I'm getting at is that seems like it might have just been like a weird description, but you were saying there were problems for something being material. And so I guess I'm confused. So are there not problems for things being material? Because you said there were problems, and that's kind of what I was getting at.
What do you mean by problems? What do you mean by problems then?
So you said earlier almost exactly. Yeah, it couldn't be something material, so this being needs to be necessarily immaterial, and then you like explain further why you thought that was the case. Because if it was like basically a causal consequence, this would lead to this entity being in like some sort of like infinite regress. I think you were talking about. Wait,
okay. So when I discussed the nature of like the infinite regress had come from the idea that like if we go back to the terms I used, I had called the first actualizer of substance S's like in current existence A, but then I discussed that each thing that actualizes one thing necessitates itself being actualized by another thing unless it has the ability for its existence built into it. And so when I discussed the infinite regress, I had discussed that like I'd called it A. If it is not purely actual, then it needs something that actualizes it. But if something actualizes it, then it also needs something that it also needs to either be purely actual or it needs something that actualizes itself. But this cannot continue on infinitely because each thing power is only derived from the thing previous to it. And so if there's no first member, then you have no causal power throughout the entire series. In the same way that like if we take a cup of coffee, right? And the cup of coffee is on the table. I'm using coffee a lot. The cup of coffee is on the table, right? The potential for the coffee to be actualized 3 feet above the ground is it's actualized by the table, and then the potential for the table to hold the cup of coffee up actualized by the floor, which is its ability to hold the table up is actualized by the foundations of the building, which is actualized by the earth itself. But if you have no earth, then you have no cup of coffee on the table. And so if you take away member of the series, all subsequent members don't have any sort of causal power at this point. And so that's kind of what I was getting at with the infinite regress, and the fact that there could not be an infinite regress. As for the immaterialness, I don't know if I was saying material has issues. I was saying that a purely actual being material would imply that it can undergo like a material change, which is not the case.
Wait, say that last part again.
The idea that it can undergo material change because it would have like a material form, which is not the case. It just lacks material form.
Okay, so like, and that's what I'm getting. It seems like almost and I'm not saying you're doing this, but I've seen a lot of people do this. It seems like it's almost euphemistic for saying that he's causally inefficacious, but then when the problem of saying like, yeah, but if you were causally inefficacious, you wouldn't have been able to like cause or sustain or interact with the universe, right? Because you would like that kind of relationship. When that's brought up, it's like this weird thing where, well, he's not material, but he kind of is material, and like I guess I'm just confused, right? Like, it seems like maybe you're bringing something a little more distinct than that. So I guess I'm trying to figure out like, is he material or is he not material? And if he's not either, what is he?
Well, he's immaterial. And is immaterial in the sense that he just lacks material form. It is the very nature of existence, I suppose, in this view.
So, like, what does it mean to lack material form? Like, what would you characterize that? Is that a description of relation, a description of properties? Like, what would it mean to lack material form?
I feel like that would be more of a description of the properties of material.
Okay, sure. Like, do you define that in terms of like causal efficacy? Do you define that in terms of like space-time presence? Like, sure. What do you mean exactly?
Well, definitely not like I suppose it's not impacted by time. So I guess like it depends on what you mean by space-time presence, I suppose, because they exist. They definitely exist like outside the nature of time, in the sense that they do not experience time and that they're timeless and eternal. But I'm not sure. Like, could you elaborate on like specifically what you mean regarding those terms?
Yeah, so all I'm getting at is just that there are a couple of definitions that I'm familiar with, and one of the ways I think you can define something being material is it having some sort of quote unquote space time presence. So what I mean by that is it either has a determinate space time location or it has an indeterminate
Okay.
space time location. So it
Yeah.
can exist the same way that my Xbox does on my desk, or it can exist the way the game of chess does, at least on a materialist view.
Yeah. So it doesn't have a specific spatiotemporal location, but I'm kind of confused necessarily what you mean by like causal efficacy, because like if my understanding of I might be like actually like have no idea what this word means, but I'm
Sure.
pretty sure that causal efficacy just refers to something's ability to be a causal agent or like exert causal influence on something, in
Right.
which God definitely does have causal efficacy in that sense, or the purely actual being rather would have causal efficacy in that sense.
Yeah, so causal efficacy is the ability to make like causal exertions.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So
So
what I'm getting at
I'm
is
not
that
delusional.
no, you're not wrong about that. I'm saying that it might be a problem depending on your definition and interpretation of materiality and physicality and causality for something like God, who's supposed to be none of those things in a sense, at the very least, right? It would be problematic to say that he does have causal efficacy because that's just a type of presumably material, natural, or physical or causal relation, right? And if he's capable of engaging in those types of relations, then it seems less sensible to call him something immaterial or non-physical or supernatural or non-natural or acausal, even in terms of origin, right? Like if we were to call him acausal in terms of origin, that itself could be non-problematic by itself. But if it's then supplemented with the idea that God is um, capable of causal exertion, then it seems to defeat the idea of what we mean by materiality, right? It seems to defeat the idea that God is this thing without causal relation. And then if he is with causal relation to some degree, then he falls subject, I feel like, to the well, where did he come from kind of critique. And
Okay.
if he doesn't fall victim to that, then he would probably need something that would either end up justifying a weird infinite regression. You would have to try and argue that he somehow has instantiated himself, which I think is problematic. Or you could try and just argue altogether that he's non-natural, but then that gets the problem. And I think this is what a lot of Christians, I know you're not Christian or whatever, at least presumably you're not, right? But a lot of Christians will end up arguing something like, oh, well, God's immaterial. And I mean that as in he literally can't interact with space-time, like space-time has no effect on him. Causality has no effect on him. But to say that then implies that he's immaterial, which they'd agree to. And they would oftentimes agree the definition. And then a lot of the times what I see justification for after that point is like a weird form of dialetheism, right? A lot of people will say, well, God can engage in contradiction, so it doesn't really matter. It's like, okay.
Yeah. I do think God is like a logical being. I don't think God is an illogical being. So let me use the idea of like what caused God, I suppose. I'm not saying everything has a cause. I'm saying only what changes has a cause. And the reason that other things have a cause is for the very reason that they have potentials that need to be actualized. And God has no potentials that need to be actualized, and thus does not require a cause. Now, I've heard in the past that this argument is ad hoc, and so I'm not sure if you think that as well. Should I go over those objections anyways?
Which argument?
That the argument that like God doesn't require a cause because God lacks potentials, and the very nature of having a cause has to do with change, and you can only change if you have potentials. I've heard that argument is ad hoc, and so I have some arguments for that to justify that.
No, I don't really care about that. So like, yeah. So I mean, if we're just saying that God is himself, so you're saying he's unchanging? Is that what you're saying? He's unchanging, but everything else is changing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm saying God
so
is
he's immutable.
Yeah.
Okay. And by immutable, you just mean like unchanging, right? Or
yeah,
no?
Unchanging.
Right. Right. So I mean, if he is unchanging, I guess we'd have to get into what exactly that means. So like by unchanging, what do you specifically mean? Like what about him is unchanging?
Well, God, like in the simplest of views, God is just the collection of his attributes, and his attributes do not change, I suppose.
So you're saying like God maintains the definition we established earlier, the three omnis?
Yeah.
Okay. Obviously, this isn't a part of your definition, and I guess I'm just going to keep like harping on this one because this is the one that I always have the hardest time like understanding. But it seems like at least at some point he might actually have to change form, because if he's lacking material form, but he's engaging with material things, right? Unless we have some special understanding of like immateriality, it seems like him lacking material and yet somehow acting as material arrives at a problem. Because if he's acting as material, I don't see what would distinguish him from material, because it seems like what we define material as is at least normally in virtue of its function, right? Which is to engage in material relation. So if he's basically engaging material relation, that would make him material, but you're saying he's not material. So I guess I'm just confused about that still.
I'm kind of confused. I feel like there's just a different definition of what material is. And I feel like so insofar you've kind of granted me the argument. I do kind of want to get into that as well, like the actual crux of establishing a purely actual being. But I do feel like that this is more of a differing view as to what it means to be material, because I literally just define material as lacking material form.
You define material as lacking material form?
Yeah, I don't think that means that you lack causal influence on. There are several things I think are immaterial. Like I don't think minds are material. Like but I still think that like your mind has like an influence on your material body. Like I'm not sure if like something being material would prevent you, like lacking material form. I don't see that as preventing you from impacting material.
So I guess my question is, do you think that this escapes the interaction problem? Do you think that you're saying that a substance that's defined in terms of its relation interacting with another substance in a relation it shouldn't have, you don't think that's a problem?
I don't necessarily see that as in my end. Like I don't see the issue of something being not having anything instantiating its being separate from itself, then impacting another thing. I don't see that as an issue now.
Because like nerd lingo aside, for like we can I guess we can just try and make it as simple for everyone to understand. So basically what I'm saying is just that it seems like this can act physically but isn't physical, right? But we're saying physical things are what acts physically. And so basically you're saying it functions physically, but it can't function physically, right? But if that's not what you're saying,
that it functions physically though. Like I feel like a really good analogy would be something like consciousness or a mind. Like this is immaterial, but it still impacts the material world.
So that's so this is why I keep, and in fact I'm so glad that we're talking about philosophy of mind now. So I know for a fact like this is like pinpointing it now. So like if we're talking about like interactions between these substances, at least per the classical definitions, this most certainly does like produce a contradiction, right? So like if we're talking in a weird almost like Descartes form of like dualism, this does actually present a form of contradiction, because you're defining these substances as lacking in the ability to interact with the other, right? But they're somehow interacting. So if they're supposed to lack the ability to touch each other, but they're touching each other, that's bizarre. That doesn't make any sense. Like, I don't even know how that would happen. And then if you want, I can.
I don't think it's physical.
It's intrinsical.
It's not.
So
it's not a physical. It's not a physical.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, like, regardless of whether or not it's so, it can be acting like the material can somehow have some sort of like non-physical ability, right? But if the physical is now non-physical somehow, or it's acting non-physically, that's bizarre because we're saying the physical is physical.
I'm saying that like nature, for example, like I don't think consciousness is a physical relationship with like the actions that your body does, I suppose, or like with what you like see in the physical world, like how your consciousness like analyzes the physical world. I don't think that has like a physical relation, and as such, I don't know if this critique is necessarily applicable.
Well, I'm saying that even that, right? So you're presenting that as like a counter case to this kind of contradiction. But I'm saying that's actually where we established this contradiction originally. Like the argument I'm presenting actually comes from this problem in a philosophy of mind. I mean, Descartes called it the mind-body problem. We more generally now just call it an interaction problem between different substances. And it appears especially like in the philosophy of mind conversations, right? So it goes, we originally thought they did interact, even though the soul and the physical body are distinct. By the way, Jade, UFC theory. But yeah, we thought they were distinct substances, but somehow they're interacting in spite of this distinction. And then that was pointed out as being problematic because if they're defined as distinct substances, right? They're defined in their inability to interact with each other, and they're interacting. That presents a contradiction. And so that's where Leibniz, in response, comes up with the idea of the two clocks. They seem to interact, but they don't actually interact. And then this obviously, this kind of thought like leads into like Berkeleyan like idealism, where we reject the idea of materiality to begin with.
I'm gonna be honest. Like I don't know if I necessarily like. I really don't like really see the issue in this. So I don't know if you want to like move on. From
I can write it down.
Or do you want to? Okay.
Here. So I'll just write it.
Okay, sure. Because I don't necessarily know. I don't think this is necessarily like an issue.
Here. There, it's in statement and negation form too.
Okay, so material can act material. Okay, so what do you mean necessarily by can't act materially? Like in terms of material form, I would agree, but I wouldn't say that God is necessarily acting in terms of material form.
So, what I normally take it to mean is usually speaking to some sort of like causal ability, right? So just what I take materiality to normally be. I think there's a distinction between the physical material and then like those and concrete objects, some like weird distinction, but I'm just gonna kind of equate them for the sake of this. What I take material to be is just those things with causal impacts and which can engage in causal relation, right? And then what it seems like we're saying about God is that if he's immaterial, then he can't have those kinds of relations, right? So he can't act on those kinds of things.
Okay. I wouldn't necessarily grant that something immaterial cannot act in terms of having causal efficacy. I would say that like in the sense that he is uncaused, I don't equate that to. I don't think that's lacking causal efficacy. I just don't think that means. I think that just means he doesn't have anything, any sort of causal relation imparted onto it. It's not that he lacks causal efficacy. I don't think even like. Many immaterial things would in general like lack causal efficacy.
I mean, they would by definition have to, unless you're presenting some other definition. So like, if that's not what you mean,
I'm still not sure about like the objection you had in regards to consciousness. If I'm being completely honest.
It's the same contradiction.
I feel like that's a
yeah. No, it's the wait. Invite me again, Jade. I didn't see it. It's the same contradiction, right? You're saying that minds lack causal relation, but are engaging in causal relation. That doesn't make any sense. So that's why we normally in philosophy reject Cartesian dualism.
Sure, I don't know if I would say that like minds lack causal relations. Like, I feel like define necessarily what you mean by causal relation. Then,
like, capable of acting upon other things, capable of being acted upon, like capable of change to some degree.
Yeah, I would say that minds do have causal efficacy in that sense. They very clearly have causal efficacy. Your
right.
mind obviously impacts what happens to the material world.
So just to clarify, you're not committing to a contradiction. You're more so saying that what you mean by immaterial doesn't really mean the classical definition of immaterial. You mean maybe something a little more modern?
I mean, if this is how you're defining like the classical definition, then I would suppose no, I don't oblige to that.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's perfectly acceptable. So then what would the definition be?
I feel like I feel like a broken record. I just feel like it's lacking material form. Like that's like I feel like that's like the simplest definition I can give.
So like, what does that mean exactly, though?
But I don't see the objection. Form means that you have no causal efficacy on the material world. That's kind of where my. No,
I'm suspending that judgment for now. I'm trying to figure out what you mean. So what do you hold on. Why did I join that? Yo, Jay, join the fuck? Give me 1 second. Jade, send it to me. I don't see it. Oh, actually, I'm gonna restart my Xbox. So anyways, I was just saying that if that's not what you're saying, I'm gonna suspend judgment on whether or not this entails a contradiction. What I'm gonna instead say then, right, is I just need more clarification on what it means to lack a material form, because like I'm not particularly sure what that means. Does that mean that he doesn't have like a geometry? Like I don't know what that means. Do you mean that he doesn't exist in the same way that a coffee on my desk does? Like he doesn't have a particular location? Do you mean he's indeterminate like the game of chess, right? I mean, there are things I can like ask about that, but is that more so what you're getting at?
So I would define material form similar to how like Aristotle does. I mean, this is the Aristotelian argument after all.
Right.
So like in the sense that like Aristotle just kind of presumed that like take a bronze statue, right? The material form of a bronze statue is buns in that sense. So I don't think that like God has that type of like matter, I suppose, on it. It doesn't have any. It's not composed of matter.
So are you saying God exists in the same way that like chess does?
I mean, I guess, I suppose, yeah.
Okay.
Would be like one way of.
Yeah, you can have like an indeterminate space time, like location.
Yeah, like an idea, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So if that's the case, then I just don't get why all of this. So let's just grant all of this. And why does this then therefore imply that he's omnibenevolent for one?
Okay, so we can get into that one.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. So omnibenevolence comes from. I have the premises. But omnibenevolence just essentially comes from the idea that like if the purely actual actualizer were like imperfect, it would have unactualized potential. It does not, so it is perfect. And then in terms of being fully good, if it were less than fully good, then it would have a privation, which would mean that like it is to fail to actualize some feature proper to it. That being purely actual cannot have such privation, and so the purely actual actualizer is fully good.
Wait, and so you're saying? Oh, God.
You go for it.
I was going to say, so you're saying that he's fully good in virtue of there being some value property that if he fails to meet implies some failure and then some level of an actualized potential, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
what's the proof for these mind-independent value properties?
Actually, okay, so I feel like I kind of jumped the gun. I actually don't even know, because I'm not like taking a particular religious stance. I don't actually know if I would necessarily call him omnipotent in that sense, as in morally perfect. I think I misspoke. Because again, I don't take any particular religious stance, so I don't really have a way to derive any terms of moral values in that sense. So I think I misspoke on that. That's my bad.
Okay, so you're ceding that interpretation of God, and you're saying he's just more so omnipotent and omniscient.
Yeah, essentially,
Okay.
And just like the fullest instantiation of his being, I suppose.
Okay. Yeah, and then how would you resolve the omnipotence paradox? Because we just agreed a minute ago, right? We don't like dialetheism. So I guess what'd your answer to that be?
So question is, can God create a rock which he cannot lift? The answer is no, because God is a logical being, thus is confined to the very nature of like what he can do. He can do everything within his ability because God is a logical being.
Okay, wait, hold on. Jade, invite me one more time. I saw that shit and then I missed it immediately. One more time, Jade, my bad.
So God cannot defy like logic because God is a logical being.
So by omnipotent, you mean more so that he can grant any logical possibility?
Yeah, he can grant with anything within his being. He cannot like do literally everything. He can grant whatever is within his being.
Okay. And then we talked a little bit. Do you want to get back to the material thing? That just be the last prediction I was going to bring. It was originally supposed to go omnipotence paradox, problem of evil, the logical problem of evil, and then this, and then this got brought up immediately. So I was like, God damn it, dude.
I don't know if because you kind of objected to the idea this purely actualizer would in fact be God, but I don't know if you would like object to if you have any objections to the actual establishment of there being a purely actualizer that you want to get into.
Yeah, so I was just gonna say that I don't see why something like that necessitates, for instance, like a causal agent, right? Or why that necessitates an agent at all.
Okay, so let's I'll give you an analogy, right? I feel like that's the best way I can do this. So cup of coffee, right? Going back to the cup of coffee because I love coffee. So let's assume that there's a cup of coffee on your desk. Let's suppose that it is 3 feet above the floor because the desk is holding it up naturally. And again, this is what I'm getting into is called an essentially ordered series. But then we have to discuss what's at the desk. This is the floor. The floor is in turn held up by the foundation of the house. And the foundation of the house is held up by the earth. And this type of series does not need to be thought of extending backwards in time, although it could be the case that the cup has been on the table for a few hours. But in this particular instance, we're going to be supposing that this happens at a particular instant. Remember, I have granted at the beginning of the argument that I'm just supposing that time extends infinitely into the past because it's irrelevant to this discussion. So it might be weird to think of this as change occurring. However, because we've defined it as the actualization of potential, potential is being actualized. Name potential for the cup to be 3 feet above the floor. The potential of the table to hold up the cup 3 feet above the floor. Each of these have dependence upon the previous member. If you take away an earlier member at any given moment of time, each member afterwards will not be able to actualize its potential. And so if we contrast this how we typically think of change, which would be more linearly ordered in the sense that I turn on the AC, which then cools the air temperature, which then cools a cup of coffee. That's more linearly structured. This is more hierarchical. And so the idea is that the desk and the floor and the foundation of the house, they have no power of their own to hold the cup up. And so the series not exist in the first place unless there is something that did have the power to hold up these intermediaries and the cup through them without having to be held up itself. And it's because they only have derivative power to do something, right? The table owns derivative power to hold up the cup of coffee. There must be something from which they derive it, some place where this is built in, so to speak. And so this is a hierarchical structure again. And I would say that these are more fundamental to reality than a linear one, namely because any linear change presupposes a hierarchical one. Because again, right, like, so let's say it's a non-existent cup of coffee cannot begin to cool down if we suppose that a cup of coffee is cooling. A non-existent cup of coffee can't cool down. Thus, the existence of the cup of coffee is presupposed in change. And then we can just break this down to what keeps the cup of coffee in existence in a hierarchical sense at any moment. And we've kind of talked about this earlier. I'll go over it again. But like, the coffee only exists insofar as the water exists. And so we need to discuss what keeps the water existing. If we talk about like the chemical bonds of it, we need to discuss like what has actualized the potential for the chemical bonds to be arranged in such a way that they are that water, it manages to exist at any given moment, because again, this is hierarchical and it's established at any given moment. And if you take away anything foundational to this, the entire thing ceases to exist. But nothing has the the ability to actualize its own potential for existence. And so there needs to be something that is purely existent. And this is what is the purely actual being.
Right. So I guess like I'm still asking though, why does it need to have like a mind?
Why does it need to have a mind?
Yeah.
Okay. So this kind of touches on how I establish like intellect, I suppose. Trying to find where I left this. Yeah, okay. So the forms or patterns that manifest in all the things it causes, that it being the pure actual thing, must in some way be in the purely actual actualizer, right? Because otherwise it would not have the ability to cause anything, right? So it has to have all the forms and patterns in which it causes be in its being, right? And so these forms or patterns can exist either in the concrete way in which they exist in individual particular things. That's not me, no.
Who did that? Shut the fuck up. You're not funny. Okay, go ahead.
So these forms or patterns can exist in either in the concrete way in which they exist in individual particular things, or in the abstract way in which they exist in the thoughts of an entity. They cannot exist in the purely actual actualizer in the same way they exist in individual particular things. So they must exist in this purely actual actualizer in the abstract way in which they exist thoughts of an intellect, which means that they have intelligence, which implies that they have a mind. So I actually think that might actually touch on somewhat like of what you had mentioned earlier regarding how they're able to interact with the world. Everything that they create must be instantiated within the being itself, the purely actual actualizer. And the reason this implies intelligence is because if they have knowledge of all these things because they're within the purely actual actualizer, then this would be essentially intelligence.
So wait, you're saying the reason why the reason why there's supposed to be a mind is because it has to be instantiated within the mind. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, essentially. Yeah.
Okay. Wait, why? Why that over like potentially just being kind of random?
What do you mean by random?
Like it randomly occurring as the result of some foundational like entity. Like, and I mean like a non-thinking entity.
Oh, wait. Okay, so like what is it randomly occurring?
Like any particular event, right? So you're saying that God is supposed to be the foundation of everything else in existence, right? And so I was saying like, why not as the result of something non-thinking, right? Because I could basically... You thought you're very smart, Sage. Anyways, yeah. Dude, you could have done that the first time. I wouldn't have saw. Yeah, anyways, like, I guess I just see a similar problem with, like, the Kalam, right? Because, or maybe even the teleological argument. Because, like, we could say, like, yeah, there's supposed to be some foundation. And I can agree that there's some foundation. But I guess I would just wonder why that foundation has to be thinking or some sort of, like, super powerful alien.
So,
or I guess in this case, like Slender Man.
Okay. Yeah. So this kind I kind of touched on this in regards to intellect, but I'll cover it one more time again. So the forms or patterns manifest in all things that it being the purely actual being. So the forms or patterns that manifest in all the things that the purely actual being causes must in some way be in the purely actual actualizer. Otherwise, they would not have the ability to impart those. So these forms or patterns can exist either in the concrete way in which they exist in an individual particular thing, or in the abstract way in which they exist in the thoughts of an intellect. They cannot exist in the purely actualizer in the same way they exist in the individual particular things, because it is not a particular. And so they must exist in the purely actual actualizer in the abstract way in which they exist in the thoughts of an intellect, which would just imply that they have an intellect, which implies a mind. And so then why
like necessarily?
Yeah, because so like if a thing you cannot impart thing you don't have, right?
So like, okay, so then presumably, right, when you're saying that it necessarily implies this, there's a contradiction. So would the contradiction be in believing like this alternative view?
Wait, what was that? Say that one more time, please.
So I asked you if this is a necessary implication, right? So if something's a necessary implication, that means to suggest otherwise and entail some type of contradiction. So what would be the contradiction that's implied by this, or by the alternative to this view?
So the alternative to this view would imply that it would imply that the thing is instantiated in the same way that a pattern or a form would be instantiated in a particular. But God, being not a particular, cannot have these forms or patterns as a part of it in that way, and so the contradiction would just be calling God a particular when they are not a particular, I suppose.
Well, I'm saying, but if we're saying there is no God,
okay, so
yeah,
we would have to establish that the thing is immaterial first. That like something being purely actual would be immaterial.
Wait, so how would that would? Yes, how would it being material imply that it's like some level of like consciousness or some type of mind?
So you've just for the sake of this point, you're granting that it's immaterial.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, yeah, okay. So if it's going to be imparting certain effects onto something, it must have these things as a part of it, right? You cannot grant something that you do not have, right? And so if this thing is immaterial, then it cannot have these forms or patterns that it imparts as a part of it in the sort of way that we would imagine they exist in an individual particular thing. They would have to exist in an abstract way in which they exist in the thoughts of an intellect. And so because they exist as a part of the thing, if they exist abstractly, they have to exist in the thoughts of the thing. And so because they exist abstractly in the thoughts of an intellect, this implies intelligence. Intelligence implies a mind.
Wait, which part implies intelligence?
Because so a purely actual actualizer is source of all causal power, I suppose. It's where everything derives its causal abilities. And so this means, though, that the purely actual actualizer needs to manifest all forms and patterns that it imparts, right? Otherwise, it'll be able to impart all those forms and patterns.
Mr. Nathan, I don't mean to be rude and definitely interrupt the debate, but can I ask you to clarify like something? Because I'm kind of dumb and I think I'm missing it. Are you saying that like all things would have intelligence because they're part of the mind, or is that what you're saying?
Because I don't think everything is part of the mind, but I would say, I mean, there are views like that, but a view is just talking about specifically the purely actual actualizer. I would say the purely actual actualizer grants like foundational causal power to things, but is not part of those things.
Okay.
Wait,
but so getting
So wait, I'm just trying to figure out what part implies like intelligence. Are you saying it's the fact that there's an intelligence to be modeled after? Is that what you're trying to say?
It's saying that there could not exist these patterns in forms in the purely actualizer unless it exists in an abstract way as it would in the thoughts of an intellect.
But okay, so you're saying the immateriality has to be a mind. That's what you're getting at.
Yes.
Wait, so if you're saying that something like necessarily need to be like mental if it's like non-physical, per the definition we granted earlier. Wait, so then are you saying that, for instance, like presumably you think the laws of logic are like abstract, right? You don't, or abstract in the definition we granted earlier, right? Like they don't exist in like.
I don't think they exist in a fabric of reality. No.
Yeah, they don't exist in like a jar or something. They exist like similarly to the concept of chess, but on a higher order level, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so then I guess I would just ask at that point, do you think the laws of logic don't hold if they're not mentally instantiated? Like if there weren't minds, suppose that for a second, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that then therefore mean the laws of logic don't hold? Because that seems impossible, like quite literally.
Yeah. So I would say that when we use the laws of logic, they're inherently descriptive. Those are not prescriptive. So I don't think they exist like necessarily in a mind. However, though, I do think that like we cannot make those descriptions of like the fact of identity, for example, if we're taking the identity without a mind. And so it kind of like depends. Like if you're talking about simply the description of like the law of identity being the idea that we describe identity, then I think I would grant necessarily that they can't exist without a mind. However, the fact of identity does exist. The fact of non-contradiction does exist. The descriptions in which we make from those do not exist.
So you're saying that as laws, they hold true, but our descriptions are merely reflections of those facts of reality, right?
Yes, yeah.
So I'm getting at those phenomena, right, seem to hold true outside of the mind, right? It doesn't seem like, for instance, if we were to suppose a mindless world, that these things are suddenly like rendered inefficacious. They seem legitimate nonetheless, right? If we assume some vacuum of a world where there is no mind, right? No mind, point blank, period, right? If there's no mind, point blank, period within the confines of the world, it seems like things can still exist. Like there could still be a random planet. There could still be things like chairs and stuff that just randomly appear as the result of some weird cosmic tornado. And that doesn't seem to entail a contradiction.
So, okay. When we discuss like, if we assume there necessarily to be something purely actual, which instantiates existence onto everything else, then I would actually disagree, because if there does not exist this purely actual actualizer, which we can establish to be a mind, then there can't exist anything. And so the fact of identity wouldn't even apply, because there's nothing to identify. There's nothing for anything to contradict each other. There's nothing for any of that to occur. So I don't know if I would necessarily agree with that, simply in the sense of a purely actual actualizer being absent. And I would say that like if like our human minds were absent, then sure, yeah. But a purely actual actualizer, because of the very nature of them being able to impart existence onto everything, I wouldn't agree with that.
So it seems like you're saying that there's something at the top of all of this, right? And so let's just say, I suppose, for instance, like, I don't know, the laws of logic or whatever. What would be the problem in doing that? Would that be a problem?
What do you mean by that?
So it seems like you're trying to establish some sort of foundation to the rest of reality. I'm saying, what if those are like the laws of logic, for instance?
Well, does the laws of logic have the ability to instantiate existence built into them? If they don't, then they can't be the laws of logic. So I don't know if that's necessarily applicable.
I think Trini got memed.
Can you guys hear me?
I think.
Oh,
we can hear you now.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I'm here.
Did you hear what I said?
Yeah. I said I guess I'm just a little confused as to what you're saying, because it seems like, or at least I thought this was the conclusion of the part of the conversation we were going over. But it seems like you're saying there's something foundational to reality. And I could see that being like the laws of logic or something, which would make a mind superfluous. It doesn't seem like there needs to be some intentionality for the non-foundational aspects of reality or the contingent aspects of reality to exist. That's what I'm not convinced about.
Okay. So remember, in this argument, we're trying to, like in my argument, I suppose, I'm trying to establish there being a purely actualizer, in the sense that it has existence built into it, the ability to actualize its own existence as the very nature of the thing, right? And so when we're discussing whether or not the laws of logic could be this thing, we need to discuss: do they have the ability to for other things to causally derive existence? Or are they merely just descriptions of the thing, in which the laws of logic are descriptions?
Okay, so wait.
They cannot impart existence.
So hold on a second. If what you're saying is it's just something that's imparting existence, I don't know if God can. Are you saying God was non-existent prior to imparting existence, or that he is an eternal aspect of existence? Is that what you're saying, more so?
Wait, what? Elaborate on the first part that you mentioned, if you might.
Yeah, no, it's good. I was saying.
Hello? Hello?
Wait, hello?
Yeah, you kind of cut out on my end.
Fuck, okay, hold on. I think I'm better now. Yeah, I was going to say, do you think that God was non-existent, or are you saying that God was eternally existent?
I would say that God was eternally existent, yeah.
So, like, let's just say it's like a weird cosmic factory, right? Or a weird existential factory. Why couldn't it be like a weird existential factory that's just unintentionally producing things that create different contingencies in reality?
So, okay. I'm assuming that this is not having to do with like the cosmological origin of the universe, right? This has to do with sustainment.
Yeah, I thought that's what we were talking about.
Yeah. This is what I'm talking about. I was just checking to make sure. I feel like when we discuss like a purely actualizer, because the very nature of whatever is imparting existence, right, would have to be something purely actual, right? But then from then on, we can then make arguments that like logically follow from the implications of there being a purely actualizer that would lead us to a mind, essentially.
Like what? Like necessarily lead to a mind?
Yeah, just like through the logical implications of the existence of there being something purely actual.
Because like so for it to be necessary, it's saying that the alternative, so like some weird like cosmic existential factor, it couldn't be the case. It would have to be something intentional, some super powerful alien is doing all of this. And if that's the case, what I'm getting at is, what would be the contradiction in assuming it's some like cosmic factory?
So we established that there is a purely actual. That's where we start in all this, right? And so you're trying to say that this might be some sort of like a mind living
like a mind. Yeah.
So I feel like the contradiction would then lie in what it would mean to be purely actual, because the way we would establish it being a mind is how I had talked about earlier, and the fact that the only way that there could exist some sort of like causal power for something to impart causal power onto other things is if they have it within themselves, right? Which means that if the purely actualizer is the foundation for which all of existence is derived, it needs to have all acts of existence, right? All the forms and patterns that existence takes on, and it needs to have these as a part of its being. And so there can only be two ways in which that's the case. It can either exist abstract in the mind, or it can exist as it would exist in a individual particular thing, right? As it would exist in like my computer, right? But if it existed like how it existed in my computer, this would imply that it takes on a material form, which it cannot do. So it must exist abstractly, and the only way that it can exist abstractly in the things is if it exists in the thoughts of an intellect. But if it exists in the thoughts of an intellect, then it must have a mind for which to exist in. And contradiction would lie in the fact of there being of you trying to assert that it could exist as it would exist in my computer.
So
because that would entail that it's not it has a material form, but it does not have a material form.
Right. So, or more so, what you're getting at is that there's supposed to be some reflection of some aspect of God in the world, and that we have minds which are supposed to be a reflection of an aspect of God, which is intentionality, and that if we have that without being some aspect of God, right, then we have something non-reflective of God. Or
not
this
even.
Actually, okay.
I mean, like, so I mean, like, I feel I would need to think on that a little bit more, but I feel as though that would apply. But that's not even necessarily what I'm getting at.
Okay.
So let's say God is allowing for the existence of a cup of coffee, right? So it needs to have in order to allow for the existence of a cup of coffee. It needs to have the ability to impart the form of a cup of coffee. Otherwise, it can't possibly be the foundation for which a cup of coffee exists if it doesn't even have the ability to if it doesn't even have the ability to impart that. And so, in order to have the ability to impart that, it must have that form as a part of it, because you cannot possibly give what you do not have. And so, if it has it as a part of itself, right? It has to have it either as it would in the cup of coffee itself, as an individual particular thing, something with material form, or it would have to exist, if it did not have material form, it would have to exist abstractly as in the thoughts of an intellect. It does not have material form. Therefore, it cannot exist as it would in the coffee itself. And so the form of a cup of coffee that is able to impart upon the cup of coffee, it's the actual cup of coffee, must exist in the thoughts of a mind. And so that is why it has a mind. It's not even necessarily that individuals with minds exist to have a mind.
So it's just the fact that there any things that are being actualized that necessitates some sort of actualizer wanting them actualized?
I feel this would be a lot better if I wrote this down. 1 second. Okay. So something.
Oh, I forgot we were doing a stream. Hold on, my bad. I haven't read any of this shit in stream. Miss, did they say anything in stream? I feel bad now. I feel like I haven't read anything for like an hour.
1 second. Trying to explain this in the
No,
right.
not really.
Oh my god, there are only 3 people missed. What did you do, dude? We usually have way more viewers.
I didn't do anything.
Holy shit, dude.
Don't grapple,
okay.
pussy.
I didn't
That's what I'm
grapple.
talking about. It was fucking
You
with my views,
fucking
bro.
need me in the clinch. What do you mean?
Did I? Oh, my bad.
Yeah.
Oh, my bad.
Bitch.
Also, what did you say, Miss K?
I don't know. I was just saying, homie is fucking with my viewers.
Oh, true.
Nah, but there is more people there.
Actually, if anyone's in here, if you could communicate what Nathan is saying, that'd be easier. Does anyone in here understand what he's saying?
I'm trying to write it down right now.
Okay.
As to what like Nathan is saying or to what you were saying.
What's his argument precisely for why there must be like some underlying intentionality?
After this one, use Alibaba.
The only thing that I've kind of understood from what his argument has been, like as in any kind of significant form, was he's kind of like saying that like since the parts of God's nature would have entailed like some form of sentience or some form of like consciousness, it would have to be this, it would have to have this property as everything's explained by it, and you can't have non.
I know that's the conclusion.
Yeah, that's all I really gain from this?
I had written it down. I'll read it out loud. In order for God to be the cause of all things, it must have all forms and patterns manifest in it. If it existed with material form, it would have these things manifest as it would have in an individual particular thing.
Okay, wait, no, I agree with that. Wait, are you saying that only the mind can be immaterial?
Well, I'm saying that if God was material, then it could have them manifest. It could have these forms and patterns manifest in it as an individual particular thing would have them manifest in it. But it's not material, and so this cannot possibly be the case. And so the only alternative to this is if it had these forms and patterns manifest in it as thoughts of an intellect. And so, because God is immaterial, or the purely actualizer immaterial, it must have all forms and patterns manifest in it as the thoughts of an intellect. But if it has the thoughts of intellect, it must have a mind for which to store these forms and patterns abstractly.
So wait, you're saying, I don't know if that was a yes or no. Wait, so are you saying that because this entity is supposed to be abstract, it must have a mind because like a mind's necessary for these sorts of abstractions?
It's close. Okay. So because
my bad, Jade.
Because God is immaterial, and because God is the source of all power, right? All causal power, and needs to have all forms and patterns manifest in it, right? If it did not have those things, then it could not be the source of all power for which everything derives existence from. Because otherwise, it wouldn't be able to be the source of any particular form or any particular pattern which it wants to exist. Because if it didn't have them manifest within it, and so because it's immaterial, it cannot have all these forms and patterns manifest in it as any sort of particular thing would. It must have them in an abstract way in which they exist in the thoughts of an intellect. And if it exists in the thoughts of an intellect, it must have a mind. And so there must be a mind.
Okay, wait. Are you able to you know how to like write like syllogisms and stuff, right?
Yeah, sure. I don't know how to make a new line on Discord though. So
enter.
Are you on the computer?
Yeah.
Control enter.
Oh, control enter. It's cool. Control. Not working. Whatever. I'll just do it one line at a time then.
Oh, my bad. Excuse me. Shift enter. My bad. I'm playing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Think you're built different, Jade? You're fucking built different?
Dude, because I'm demotivated because you cheated last game. That's why I'm losing right now. You fucking cheated, so I lost all my
you admit I broke
motivation.
your will. Like,
because you cheated. Fucking
dude,
cheated.
I'm like
You would
Izzy
not
right
do
now,
this
dude.
to me.
You
on
can't
this.
handle my feints. Like,
Bro, hop on UFC 4.
that's fine. You're better at UFC 4, but I'm just dominating you right now in UFC 3.
You just got wobbled, and you're literally about to get
Yeah,
knocked
do
out.
something
What
about
the
it.
fuck are you
Do
talking
something about it.
about? I'm gonna wobble your mom.
Alright, I'm gonna wobble you.
I'm gonna wobble your dad.
Dude, what would you do if I threw a cheeseburger into traffic right now? Like, how would you respond? Like, how fast would you
I
run
just go
into the
get it
traffic?
and eat it.
Yeah, I know.
I'd have to get it quick because fucking you take it.
Weren't you earlier just telling me, I just realized, I found a place that sells vegan pizza. Like, you're weird, dude. Like,
What? What the fuck
Do
did
you
I
remember that? Caesar, do you remember that shit? What the fuck is wrong with them? Like, who said that kind of shit, dude?
What the fuck did I ever say that?
Isn't
Spencer,
that
stop
just
fucking
Caesar's
reposting my
thing?
shit.
Jade, I was in call for that. Like, don't lie.
When?
Earlier, like right before the debate started, you were like, "Oh, I'm so excited, vegan pizza, I'm ready." Like, I
Nah,
was
bro,
like,
y'all capping on my boy Jade, bro. Y'all capping
Yeah,
on my
what
boy
the
Jade. It was
fuck?
actually Infamous who said that.
No, it wasn't.
It was actually infamous.
No,
He said that.
stop slaying.
Yeah, it was. Infamous.
That's why he
This
did a
guy's the
British
host of the
accent.
stream.
You fucking cheater.
I'm telling you. It was
Oh, my bad.
infamous.
Okay, here.
Oh,
Maybe
so
they
you're
asked me to get a free hit on you? Like I could get a free hit on you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Taunt. I'm gonna fucking abuse this taunt. Taunt right now.
There you go.
Alright.
My best
How are you
Pokemon is
still
Ivysaur,
losing?
by the way.
I'm not losing, I'm winning. Also, what happened to the guy, the Nathan? Where's he?
I'm just
Oh, he's
typing
writing.
this
He's
out.
writing.
He's writing his syllogism.
It's probably easier to.
Trini,
I'd say
please tell
probably
me you
easier
knew
to-
that like he was like I said that.
Wait, what do you mean?
Like, did you know I said that like that shit, or did you genuinely think that Jade said the
Implying Jay didn't actually say that's
Okay.
hilarious.
So
Dude, why did you do a
P1,
British
P1's
accent?
new, but P1 is God is the source of all of existence. P2, I will just read it for the stream. P2, in order to be the source of all of existence, it must have all forms and patterns that exist manifest in it. P3, these forms and patterns can only be manifest in it in the way that they would in an individual particular thing or abstractly in the thoughts of an intellect. P4, these forms and patterns can only exist as they would in an individual particular thing if the purely actual being had a material form. P5, a purely actual being does not have a material form. Conclusion 1, these forms and patterns must be manifest as abstract thoughts of an intellect. P6, but this necessitates a mind. Conclusion 2, so a purely actual being must have a mind.
Oh, shit. Jade rematch, by the way. Wait, so what's the justification for P3?
P3, these forms and patterns can only be manifest in the way. So these are the if it was a material thing, right? Then we can see that these things are oh yeah, okay, thank you. If it was a material thing, we can say that these form
latter disjunct, the part where it says abstractly in the thoughts of an intellect. So the latter disjunct.
Oh,
Rematch.
I feel like this is there's only two ways that you can have thing, right? As a part of you, right? They can only be in your mind, or they can be a part of the material aspect of your being. And so if they're not a part of the individual, if they're not a part of the material aspect of your being, then they must exist with mind. It must be manifest in your mind as the only alternative.
Wait, so we're supposing that there's a God. I'm saying why can't something function to the same services and roles without having a mind, right? Which is already questioning premise one.
Right. So, okay. We would have to then establish that this thing would be material somehow, while still being purely actual. The contradiction lies in P4 and P5 for that. So these can only be manifest as an individual particular thing if the purely actual being had a material form, but it does not have a material form, so it can't be manifest in that way.
Wait, why would it need to be material?
For it to exist as as a individual particular thing.
No, I mean this completely actual being majiggly thing. Why would it have to then have a materiality to it?
Oh, I think it's immaterial.
Right. So then it seems we could have something that serves the same roles. So it seems like this argument underdetermines unless you're saying it necessarily or likely implies some sort of intentional being. So that's what I'm saying. It feels like it runs into an underdetermination problem.
Let's assume that the purely actual being is immaterial, right? The only way then that it could instantiate all of existence, which includes all these forms and patterns that are a part of existence, is if those forms and patterns are manifest in the purely actual being. Otherwise, it would not be able to impart those forms and patterns onto other things that exist, right? Would you agree insofar as I say that?
Wait, say that again. I'm sorry, I'm playing games.
So it's essentially, in summary, you cannot give what you do not have. So so everything that purely actual being imparts onto other things that exist must be manifest in the purely actual being.
So you're saying it can't give a mind because it doesn't have a mind?
Well, that would be an example. essentially.
Right.
It wouldn't be able to give like a computer its existence if it did not have the form that a computer would take manifest in it.
Wait, so then I guess my question is just like, if you're saying that it's like some weird necessity for instantiation, I guess I'm not seeing why like there would be a contradiction in saying that it could, like, for instance, produce minds while not itself having a mind. Like, why would that be problematic? Because we see that in the real world. Like, certain things seem to be able to, like, at least produce minds in, like, an atheistic view, right? A traditional atheistic view, without itself having a mind. Like, the cosmos just seems like, I guess for the most dysphomistic way of saying it, like a cosmic accident, right? So I mean, like, why couldn't something like that happen?
So okay. So in order for I guess something to have the power to instantiate something preceding it, it must either have this power built into it, or it must be getting this power as a derivative of something prior in the series to it, right? So like a table, right? A table only has derivative power to hold up the cup of coffee that we were talking about earlier. It does not have the power in and of itself, right? Because it only gets the derivative power from the floor in which it stands on. If the floor went away, it wouldn't be able to hold up the cup of coffee. And so the floor necessarily has the power to hold up things built into it, which is why it's able to grant that power. Not built into it; it's derived technically from the foundations of the building. But have these powers in it at the moment, for which it is then able to impart such powers onto the table. And so, in a similar way, the powers of imparting these forms and patterns must be manifest in purely actual being, which means that these forms and patterns must be manifest in the purely actual being.
All right, so like, I think I'm starting to get what you're saying, but I guess I just don't.
It is a little bit. It took me a little bit to understand this the argument, but it's typically how this seems to be, in my view at least, the best way to show the classical theistic view of God.
Yeah, I'm just not even. I'm not even entirely sure what exactly the claim is, and that's like what I'm having trouble with so far. So like, you're saying precisely that there needs to be some component of the overarching entity that can then be reflected by one of its contingent entities, right? But
sorry, I kind of zoned out, if I'm being honest. Could you repeat that?
No, it's okay. So it seems like you're saying for the overarching entity to have some set of contingent entities, these contingent entities have to reflect some aspect of the overarching entity, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you think you're good, dude? I'm gonna beat you the fuck up with Dina White. Let's get it. Yeah.
Anyways,
Anyways,
the fuck up with him.
Bet. Let's see. Yeah. So I mean, like, if that's what you're getting at, then my confusion is just like, why? Like, why can't it just be like a cosmic accident? Like, and I feel like so far there hasn't been especially like a contradiction shown, and that's like what we're all kind of confused by, right? Like, why can't it just be some accidental reflection, or rather some accident point blank period without some sort of reflecting ability?
Sure. So something cannot come from nothing. Would you agree to that? Something cannot come from nothing. Okay. So that means there must be something for which to derive these abilities. I don't actually think the idea of a cosmic accident is necessarily applicable, in the sense that kind of implies that like that the cosmos just came out of nothing. So I wouldn't know if I would necessarily a cosmic accident, but that's just to kind of go to like kind of address your analogy. But like,
right, but what if it like there is like an eternal foundation, right? There's some sort of eternal foundation. Why couldn't that just be the case?
Right. So this eternal foundation is what we would then call the purely actual being, and then we would try to logically assert the existence of a mind with this eternal foundation, because like this eternal foundation would have to fulfill certain criterion. and these criterion would necessitate that this eternal foundation has a mind.
And wait, why would it have a mind? Oh my god!
He fucking sucks.
So it's the idea that they have intellect that necessitates that they have a mind, and they have intellect because they have these forms and patterns manifest in it, and they have these forms and patterns manifest in it because if
wait, are we supposing that the entity has intellect, or are you saying we have it? If you're just saying it has entity, I'm asking for the justification for that claim.
Yeah. So the purely act being has intellect, and it has intellect because it has these forms and patterns manifest in it, and the reason that it has these forms and patterns manifest in it is because it's sustaining it at any given moment. Remember, it's not like when you would kind of mention a cosmic accident. One second.
I'm about to fuck you up with a
Sorry, that was just my sister. So
it's okay.
If there was where was I? Oh yeah. So what you would discuss regarding a cosmic accident, you had kind of I guess asserted that like. Well, at one point, minds didn't exist, and I'm assuming this is what you're going at with this. At one point, minds didn't exist, now minds did exist. So it seems as though minds can come about without there being a prior mind. Right? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
I was just saying, like, why can't we have these foundational, things without some, like, underlying intentionality to it, right? Like, similarly to how we typically understand the universe to function, right? The universe doesn't seem like intentional to a lot of people, right? That doesn't seem particularly inconceivable. It seems like at the very least we can grant that there's a case where there is some purely physical world that has these, planets and solar systems and galaxies and nebulae or whatever, without there being a need for a god. Those are just highly unlikely. Oh my god, Jay, I thought you were gonna beam me up, D. What the fuck? Anyways, yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
So remember, we're not discussing creation of planets. We're not discussing we're not discussing how things got here.
No, I know. I'm saying saying like we know that there are cases that we can perfectly conceive where there are instances of things that are, for instance, capable of happening without some greater intentionality. And so it seems like if those things are at least conceivable, I don't see why it's inconceivable here.
So this is kind of like David Hume's argument, right? That we can conceive of something occurring without some sort of apparent cause. Therefore, it should be possible. But I have a few critiques of that. So, for one, to conceive of a given A without at the same time conceiving of B is not the same thing as conceiving of A existing without B, right? We can conceive of a man without conceiving of how tall he is. But that doesn't follow that any man can go without having a specific height. I can conceive of a coffee cup simply existing without conceiving of its cause, but it doesn't follow that this can actually be the case. Lastly, and like appearing in empty space, I don't know if you make this argument, this is David Hume's argument. Appearing in empty space out of nothing, just spontaneously, doesn't necessarily mean beginning to exist. It could also just be like something like teleportation. So that doesn't necessarily imply that something just begins to exist without a cause. But mostly in terms of what you've said, the first bit is kind of where I'm getting at. Just because we can conceive of something being the case without another thing doesn't mean that like this is actually the case.
I'm not saying it's actually the case. I'm saying like we can conceive of it, and I haven't heard, at least explicitly so far, what the contradiction would be for this. Like, it seemed like you were presenting a contradiction for what if something was material and immaterial, but I think we already talked about how that's not what I'm speaking on, and so it seems like that's not really what I'm talking about so far. And if that's the case, right, then what I'm asking about, at least so far, hasn't been completely addressed. Jade, are you not gonna? Oh, that's why. So I'm just like wondering like what the contradiction would be in saying, oh, this there's this foundational actualizing.
Hello?
Wait, hello?
I stopped hearing you. Yeah, at actualizing.
Oh, wait, can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, you said I stopped hearing you at foundational actualizing.
Yeah. So if something is capable of foundationally actualizing the rest of existence, or at least contingent existence, right? Why does that necessitate a mind? Why would that require a mind on the pain of contradiction if you reject that? That's what I'm asking.
So
yeah.
So are we granting that this thing is immaterial?
Yeah.
Okay. So if it is immaterial, then the only way that it could manifest existence is if all these things that it manifests are imparted or built into itself, right? They have to be manifest in itself as well. And so there are two in which this can be the case. They could be manifest in it as they would a material object, or they could be manifest in it as they would in the abstract thoughts of an intellect. The contradiction comes in when you try to say that be manifest in a material object as they would in a material object, whilst also saying that the purely actual being is immaterial. Because you can't possibly have something manifest as it would in a material object if the thing in question is immaterial.
Wait, isn't that what I gave you as a criticism? And then you said that's not what you mean by immaterial?
This is necessarily what I mean, because this is material form. And so you can't have something manifest as it would material form without existing as a material form.
But I thought you said earlier that God has a material form but has like material abilities. So why would this be discounted on that view?
I don't believe I said that. I said I was holding to the idea that God is immaterial, and you would
God
just
has a
accept that as
material
well.
form or a non-material form, right?
Yeah, God does not have a material form.
Right. So then, if you agree with that, then doesn't this actually hurt your own view? Like, is this not a problem for your own view, or what's the disparity?
I'm very confused. I'm not sure why it would be. Because it. So you would agree God would be immaterial, which would mean that they lack material form, right?
Yeah, I feel like people define God to be immaterial. That makes sense.
Yeah. So if God does not have a material form, how can they have properties that are manifest as they would in a material?
What do you mean by that?
So like these forms and patterns that God is supposed to be the source of all of existence for which things are meant to derive their causal power to manifest, right? These have to be manifest in God, right? Otherwise, God could not possibly impart their existence in terms of material objects. And so they have to be manifest in God in one of two ways. They have to be manifest in God either as God would be an abstract object, not abstract object, sorry, an immaterial object or a material object. If God exists as a material object, then they could be manifest as they would in any sort of individual particular thing, right? So like the form of a computer, right, could be manifest as it would in an actual computer being like in a particular thing. But God is not material, so this can't be the case. And so the only option is the situation of which God was material. It was immaterial, my bad. If God was immaterial. And the only way that this could be manifest in an immaterial thing is if it exists abstractly in the thoughts of something with intellect. And so because God is immaterial, these forms which the rest of existence derives their like causal power from, or they exist in the thoughts of an intellect.
Wait, so earlier you were saying that it was the case that there would be a contradiction for the alternative because of the material and immaterial aspects, but now you're saying that God has immaterial aspects, but he's engaging materially. I'm not seeing a disparity.
Okay,
what's the symmetry breaker?
So
yeah,
the contradiction that I was saying that you obliged to, or not obliged to, that your view would end up with, is holding that God is immaterial, whilst also holding that God can manifest these forms and patterns within it as a material object would.
Wait, when did I say anything about materiality? Where did that come from?
Well, this would be the logical consequence of it.
How so?
Because you had said like what is the contradiction in it, and so I was just kind of going down the the line of reasoning that you'd have to make in order to come to that conclusion, but that conclusion is inherently contradictory to the idea of an immaterial.
Wait, how does
God.
it come to that conclusion?
Because again, there are two ways in which all forms and terms that exist can be manifest in a purely actual being, as they would in an individual particular thing, or abstractly in the thoughts of an intellect. But they can only exist in the former if the object was material. Because the object is not material, they can't exist in the former. They must exist as in the latter.
Wait,
and if they exist as matter, the thoughts of an intellect, this necessitates a mind.
Wait, okay, so you're saying what necessitates a mind, not them existing in matter?
Well, that'd be them being immaterial would logically follow that they have a mind if they are the source of all of existence, which the purely actualizer would show them to be the source of all of existence at any given moment in time.
Wait, why?
Why what?
Wait, why would that necessitate a mind?
I mean, this is just the I can recopy and paste the syllogism, but this is just in the syllogism that I had been.
Well, you said no, I'm actually okay. So even I asked you earlier, right? You said that there is a disjunction, and then one part of the disjunction was, or they can exist abstractly as parts of the mind, or I think you said something like thoughts in the mind of something like with intellect or something like that. But my problem with that is I don't know why there isn't an option that, for instance, right, there's something that is non-natural or like immaterial or whatever that isn't at the same time with like a mind. Why is that the case?
Okay. So we can discuss the nature of such a thing, right? How a thing would be capable of existing, right? So we have to establish certain implications of this actualizer. They are the source of all of existence at any given moment. They are the foundation for which things are able to sustain their own existence. They grant actuality to things, to the existence of things, right? Mm-hmm. So in order to do all that, you must have, so if things are deriving their power for existence, they must have something to derive it from. So if I am deriving my power to exist as a human being, right, I must have that power lying elsewhere for which to derive it from. So this power, right, must be present in the purely actual being, right? And so this would exist as like some sort of form or pattern of how I am laid out, my existence entails, right? It'd be manifest in the purely actual thing from which I then derive it from. And then from this, right, there are two ways this could be manifest in the purely actual being. And one of those ways is contradictory to the nature of a purely actual being. Thus, it must be the case that these forms and patterns that allow my existence to be sustained or manifest in a purely actual being in the ways of abstractly in the thoughts of an intellect. And so if they're existing abstractly in the thoughts of an intellect, well, then that necessitates a mind. And so if that necessitates a mind, then they have a mind. And so it's not necessarily that you can't conceive of an immaterial idea, an immaterial, purely actual thing that doesn't have a mind. It's just that it wouldn't logically follow to the nature of the thing. And just because you can conceive of something doesn't necessarily make it the case that that is this.
This is what I'm saying. I'm not saying where you're deriving a contradiction, right? When we're assuming your definition. Now, if we're not assuming your definition, we're going back to assuming mine. Your view certainly entails a contradiction. So I imagine we don't want to do that. But if we're coming to the acceptance of your definition, then it most certainly doesn't entail a contradiction of the type that you described, right? Because you said that it's immateriality would somehow entail a contradiction, but you already said before that you think immateriality doesn't entail some inability to interact causally. So that's just not true on your view.
This has nothing to do. This has nothing to do with causal interactions. Actually, this has something to do with how forms and patterns.
Well, interactions, point blank. Interactions, point blank.
It's not even interacting with anything other than itself at this point.
Well, I think you're talking about sustainment, right?
Oh no! This point right here is talking about how forms and patterns are manifest in the purely actual being. And so this doesn't have anything to do with the nature of sustainment, except for P1, really.
Wait, no, I don't. I'm saying the definition of like abstract / immaterial that I gave, that entails a contradiction on your view, point blank. So I'm saying that you attempting to charge the view that I presented as an alternative to your view, right? Doesn't seem to actually entail a contradiction unless we accept the original definition I proposed earlier. But that's not just a problem uniquely for that alternate view, right? That'd be a problem for your view as well. So I can drop that hypothetical view that I offered up as just a reason to show that your argument underdetermines, because if you admit that this kind of like argument entails a contradiction, that's just an implicit admission of contradiction on the kind of view that you originally presented, in which case, then I don't need to say any more, I suppose. But if that's not what you're doing, then there's just not a contradiction. Then I'm stuck here seeing why it's impossible, right? Because if there's not some sort of contradiction, it doesn't seem to fulfill the criterion of logical impossibility.
So, okay. How about you walk me through the line of reasoning it would take for there to not be a contradiction in my terms? And they're establishing a purely actual being, for which all of existence is derived from. All powers of existence are derived from. That does not need to have a mind.
Sure. So it seems like just a minute ago you were saying that what you mean by immaterial is something just having an indeterminate like spatiotemporal location, right? So functioning in the same way that, for instance, chess does, right?
And
now,
just like the idea. Yeah, it's an idea, essentially, similar to that.
Right. So if that's the case, I don't see how then that is somehow incapable of interacting materially, which means the contradiction that was attempted to be pointed out as a problem for this alternate view isn't actually a contradiction if we assume that definition, which means that the argument has the underdetermination problem that I've suggested, unless you have some reason to show that as either A, less plausible, B, less explanatory, C, conceptually flawed, or D, riddled with some sort of absurdity that I would otherwise not accept. And I don't see any of those things being offered up so far, so it seems like your argument underdetermines.
You haven't really given me a reason as to why something with immateriality that lacks material form would be able to manifest a certain property in the way that a material object who has material form would be capable of. Because your objection, your view. Because your objection, right, or earlier, had to do with how a immaterial object is able to interact with the material world, but that's not at all what I'm talking about. Because this has nothing to do. This has nothing to do with interaction in the material world. So I don't see how your earlier accusation would even be applied here.
Wait, so when you said that there's a contradiction between the immaterial and the material, what were you speaking in reference to?
I was speaking in reference to how the properties, or rather, how the forms and patterns for which other things that exist with material form derive their existence from, how those could be manifest in a purely actual being, as they would in something with material form. That I don't see how that's possible if we presume a purely actual being to be immaterial.
Well, where's the impossibility? Like, where's the contradiction?
The contradiction lies in the necessity of a purely actual being material in order to manifest these forms and patterns that we're discussing, that and from which other things derive their existence from. In a way as though material objects would, right? In a way as they would exist and manifest in an individual particular thing.
Wait, but just telling me that there's a necessity is the equivalence of saying that to deny it is logical impossibility, right?
Yes.
So that's just either begging the question, because that's just restating the proposition as justification, or that's just a reassertion. So I'm curious as to like what the justification for that belief would be.
Okay. So it is a logical contradiction, because in order for one thing to be the case, I listed this out in premise 4 and 5, right? In order for the forms and patterns to be manifest as they would in an individual particular thing, this necessitates that the purely actual being has a material form. But a purely actual being does not have a material form. And so if you hold that they can exist as they would in an individual particular thing, you are holding to the view that the actual being has a material form, whilst also holding to the view that a purely actual being does not have a material form, thereby forming a contradiction.
Wait, why would I be holding the view that it's like material?
Because an individual particular thing is necessarily material.
Wait, why?
Particulars are concretes.
Wait, why are they necessarily material?
Well, a particular object is concrete. Like there are universals and particulars. Particulars are concrete.
Why?
That's just like the definition. I mean, I can give you the definition of what a particular is. Like a particular is an individual thing here. Yes. So in philosophy, it's an individual item, as contrasted with a universal quality.
Right. So why does that need to be like physical? It didn't say anything there about concrete. It just said an individual item.
I can just Google right now, or particulars concrete, or particulars concrete. In metaphysics, particulars are defined as concrete spatio-temporal entities as opposed to abstract entities such as properties or numbers.
Okay, so the first time you said that it was about qualities versus individual items. So I took that to be what you mean the first time. But it's a logical consequence of that being an individual concrete item. Wait, so if what you're ultimately saying is just like more vaguely like, well, it would either be concrete or abstract. I'm saying that it's not concrete. So like I don't know where you're getting that from. Why would it have to be concrete?
If it's not concrete, then it's abstract, and so it can't exist. These forms and patterns can't exist as they would in a concrete item.
Wait, why?
Somewhat can feel like if a material object. So like I feel like a good way to explain this would actually be the hylomorphic view of things. So in hylomorphism, a particular object had, like, go back to the bronze statue, right? They have a form which is immaterial, manifest as in a bronze statue. Like a bronze statue has the form of a statue, and they have the material, the matter, that allows us to call it to call it a bronze statue, specifically bronze, and the form is what allows it a statue. And so if it was in a particular thing, the form in this sense would necessitate some sort of shape or function in the thing as we would imagine it, adopted by the matter, in a material object, right? Because in the hylomorphic account, for example, form is the actuality that matter takes up. And so, but this doesn't make any sense when we're dealing with an abstract item, because there's no matter or anything for something to take up a form with. There's no matter or anything for something to take up a pattern with. This would be like saying like red has a form, as a particular thing. That doesn't really make.
Wait, so how does God escape this problem? Is what I'm asking.
Okay, yeah. So God would escape this problem by having these forms and patterns existing abstractly in the thoughts of an intellect.
So he has abstract thoughts of physical things, right?
So yeah, he has thoughts of things as we do, right? As our consciousness, which is immaterial, has thoughts of material forms.
Okay. And so then I guess I would just ask at that point, right? like, why is it the case that, oh my God, if I get to the next again. So I guess I would just ask at that point, right? Why is it the case that if we're going to suppose this, why is it the case that there just can't be accidentally things with these forms? Because you're just saying that God has them in his mind, right? But it seems like clearly abstractions are capable of like mimicking or in some way experiencing, even on your view, these things that are not immaterial or which are material, right? So if God can store things that are material in his mind, I don't see why we can't have like accidental reflections of the material.
Okay.
Or rather, things that accidentally lead to the material.
Because that doesn't have a sufficient explanation as to why things exist the way they do as of right now. So like,
what do you mean?
Why is my
explanation?
So like, why does my phone exist as a phone? In the why has all the parts of my phone actualized the existence of a phone? Why has the matter, the atomic nature of what makes up my phone actualized itself in the way that it is actualized? It has to have been imparted on it, or sorry, there has to, that power for actualization has to have been imparted on it by something that is purely actual. And this thing can only impart that power if it has those things manifest in it. For something to be accidentally created would offer no explanation at all as to why it currently exists at the moment.
So are you appealing to like the principle of sufficient reason?
Not even. I'm just saying that like you cannot logically explain as to why something.
Yeah, then that'd be irrelevant. Yeah, that'd be irrelevant. I think.
Why would that be irrelevant? If you can't
that means it's not impossible.
The end of a wait. Yeah. If you can't logically explain the end point of some sort of hierarchical series, for which all of existence is actualized. How is that not relevant?
I mean,
unless you're discussing the irrelevance of a hierarchical series, in which we can.
For one, it seems like we just established it was contradictory, but I guess you can talk more about that in a second, right? Okay. So what I wanted to say though is just it seems as if that's irrelevant because just saying, well, there's not sufficient explanation seems to appeal to there needing to be one, but there are brute facts, right? And so I don't see why this couldn't qualify for a brute fact.
Because I guess I sort of misspoke because I'm not even appealing to the PSR. This is actually one of my objections to the PSR, that there are brute facts. Right. It's not even, but that's not even necessarily what I tried to say. I was trying to say that there's no endpoint for like sort of hierarchical series. And my point of explanation was saying that you have no way to logically establish an endpoint of a hierarchical series. If something was just accidentally created and it has absolutely no nature of what is actualizing its existence, well, there's no endpoint then.
Wait, what do you mean there's no endpoint?
Okay, so we can go again to the coffee and the table and the floor. So coffee is held 3 feet above the ground by the table, which is actualized its potential to exist 3 feet above the ground. Its potential to hold up the coffee is actualized with the floor. Its potential to hold the table is actually by the foundations of the building, and the foundations of the building's potential. I guess we haven't gotten to this yet. Is actualized by the Earth itself. And it seems as though the Earth would be the last member in this. It's not actually the case necessarily, because into what keeps the Earth in existence itself. But just for the sake of this analogy, right? If we take away the Earth, there is nothing. There's nothing to hold up the cup of coffee, and so you need some sort of foundational member for all of these, and if for which it sufficiently allows for other things to derive their causal power, which is only derivative in nature. And so if you're just asserting that things just like accidentally are the case, this would be like asserting that a table just accidentally holds up a cup of coffee without any sort of like planet or anything to hold this up. It's just completely illogical.
I mean, do you think like the planet was like forced to be here? You think there was like someone like pushing the planet here?
This isn't even okay. So this kind of point in regards to how a planet had gotten here would relate to more of like a linear structure, right? But that's not even really relevant. Like if we go back,
I'm asking you analogically, right? Like if we have a tree, right, and a tree is like being fertilized and then is just growing into a tree, right? Well, I guess like a tree sapling and then it's growing into a tree. You think that needs to be intentional?
The process over a duration of time, like a purely actual being. But that's not.
No, it could just happen.
What I'm saying is what I'm saying. Right. That's
but
not relevant to what
you're bringing up
saying.
Things and saying that they're foundational members, and I'm saying yeah. But even in the thing that you brought up, right? Even in the thing you brought up, they're foundational members that don't have intentionality, unless you're going to appeal to the intentionality of putting a table there to begin with. But I don't see why analogically then we couldn't appeal to like a tree sapling.
Wait. So okay, if we're discussing the nature of a tree sapling growing into a tree as just that like event, I suppose, over a duration of time, then like I'm not saying that there needs to be some like sort of cosmic origin which allows for that to happen. No, but I am saying that at any given moment the tree grows, there does need to be some sort of foundational aspect of reality, of existence, as purely actual being, which keeps the tree in existence for it to grow. Because any change, and listen,
but that's not the disagreement. I'm saying why does it need to be intentional? So then the tree sapling analogy, do I need to plant the tree for it to be there? It doesn't seem like that's the case, right?
Because then you have no foundation for which to derive the actuality of existence. Like why is the tree sapling actualize that potential to exist?
It just did it by accident, I guess. That's bad.
Wait, then we're just asserting creation ex nihilo, like just something popping out of nothing?
No, where did that come from? We agree that there's some foundational member. We're agreeing that there's some sort of foundational member. And then these things are just accidents in the sense of they're not intentional. They're accidents or byproducts of this foundation. But that's about it.
What's the objection here then? Like what specifically are
that's
you?
That's an alternative to your view.
What specific objection are you offering? I suppose
I'm saying that your argument underdetermines there being a god. I agree that there's a foundational member. Yeah.
Okay. I kind of see where this is coming from. So I think you're saying that I say that like God needs to like doesn't even found in the proof of like my being a mind. I didn't even assert that God necessarily needs to intentionally allow for God for things to exist. Although I think they do, but that's not even necessary to the proof. Yeah, my proof for a mind is just that things need to exist in a mind in the purely actual being. Like that.
Wait, why?
So, I'm going to recopy the syllogism.
No, I mean like I feel like you're repeating a lot, and I'm just not really getting a clear answer, and so I'm just trying to like figure it out. So what you're saying is the justification is basically like the soliloquy, and I'm saying that I don't get how this necessitates intentionality. So what's the proof that they're going to need to be intentional states on pain of contradiction?
That's not even necessary to the proof though. Like I don't think I need to.
Like if you don't think that you can prove that if you can't prove the impossibility of the contrary, I don't see why we can't just appeal to that.
I don't think I need to even prove that God is intentionally doing anything, because that's not.
That actually helps my explanation more. Yeah.
Wait. But all I am saying is that God necessarily has a mind. That this purely actual being necessarily has a mind. I'm not even saying any I'm not even saying anything about whether or not they use the mind. I'm just saying that they have a mind. Your initial objection was whether or not they have it. So this seems somewhat like shifting the goalpost.
I didn't say whether they had a mind. I said, what's the proof that there's some foundational member that has some intentional state? I mean, if you're taking that to mean, why does God need a mind, right? That's not what I'm saying.
So, previously you had just agreed that, like, for the sake of this argument, you had just agreed that there was a foundational member. Now you're asking me to prove that there's a foundational member?
Did you not just hear what I said? I said that there's a Yeah, clearly, right? Okay. So, like, there's a foundational member. We can agree to that. How does that prove this foundational member has a mind, though? Like, some intentional state.
Okay, so how do you define, like, mind, then? Like if I'm unconscious, do I not have a mind because I'm not acting with intent?
No, I'm saying that what's the proof that there's something with the mind? We can say intentional states, but I thought intentional states are relevant to your argument specifically. But if you want to broaden it, yeah. Sure. Then if it's not about intentional states, which is the proof for a mind?
Yeah, proof of the mind is that in order for anything to be manifest in God, any of these properties, these forms, these patterns, and which other things have been able to.
That's just the conclusion. I'm saying why. Yeah, that's the conclusion, but why?
Yeah. In order for that to be the case, there'd be a mind. Are you asking why that is the case?
Yeah.
Okay, so then this would tie into the proof for omnipotence. Because if God is the derivation of all of existence, I suppose. Let me find it. Yeah. So to have power entails being able to actualize potentials. Any potential that is actualized is either actualized by the purely actual actualizer or by a series of actualizers, which terminates in the purely actual actualizer. Which is just to say that anything that is any potential that is actualized inevitably ends with a purely actual actualizer. Or it is immediately instantiated by a purely actual actualizer.
But we agree that an unactualized actualizer just means like a foundational member. Why does that mean something with the mind?
Wait. Because I'm first asserting, right, that all power derives from the purely actual actualizer, which means that this thing this is omnipotent, right? And this is needed, me establishing that God is omnipotent and all power for existence is derived from the purely actual actualizer is needed in me proving that God has a mind, right? And so whatever is in effect is its cause in some way, whether formally, virtually, or eminently. This is the principle of proportionate causality. And so the purely actual actualizer is the cause of all things. Now, the form patterns manifest in all things, its causes, must be in some way be in the purely actual actualizer. If it is the cause of all things, all forms and patterns that manifest in all things must be in the purely actual actualizer, right? And this is the critical foundation for which we then derive it. So these forms or patterns can either exist either in the concrete way in which they exist in an individual particular thing, or in the abstract way in which they exist in the thoughts of an intellect.
Wait, okay, so that's what I've been asking. I've asked you like 4 times now. Wait, so do you think abstract equals mind? Like, is that what you're saying? Like,
no.
Wait, so then why is that relevant? Or rather, how does that?
So when we have an idea, right, that's an abstract thing that exists in our mind, right? And that's all that I just said means, right? So these forms and patterns can either exist concretely or abstractly in the thoughts of an intellect. But they can all exist concretely as a part of the purely actual being if the purely actual being is material, as in has material form. If they are not...
Yeah, that didn't answer the question. That's just like a reassertion.
I'm getting there because I feel like I am answering the question. But so...
No, this is just get straight to the point because this is like... I mean, we've heard this part like 9 times. Like, I'm just asking...
Yeah, I'm confused what your objection is then. Because I feel like I've reasserted this several times.
I'm trying to see what you're saying. It's not even an objection at this point. It's literally just a question. So I asked you specifically... Can there only be mental content as abstract things? And you're saying that's not what you're saying. So then why is this a dichotomy?
Right. So because there's 2 ways that something can be a part of something, right? They can either be as a concrete aspect of your being, or they can be abstractly in your thoughts. Would you agree with that? Hello?
Trini, did you cut out?
Hello?
Trini's Wi-Fi sucks.
How much did you hear me?
How do we know?
Wait, how much did you hear from that? Hello? This isn't just me, is it? Or
no?
Okay.
I can literally hear you guys. What the fuck? Oh my god!
You can't hear him.
I couldn't. Trini sometimes just stops talking on my end. Oh, okay. Yeah. So Trini, the reason that it's a dichotomy is because something can either exist as a part of you in a concrete way, or they can like a concrete way as a physical aspect of your being, or if they are a part of you, they can exist abstractly in your thoughts. Would you agree with that?
Hey, what's up?
Oh, okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I said, why would I believe in this dichotomy? You're saying that I'm saying I'm agnostic to the proposition, so why should I believe in it?
Well, those are the only two ways in which something could exist, right? Like, so something can either be a particular or universal, right? If it's a particular, it exists in a concrete. If it's a universal, it exists abstractly. And so if it's
but hold on a second. If it can exist abstractly, that doesn't, even by your own like standard, entail that it exists in some like mental content type fashion. That's where you're making a jump. So I want the explanation for that in particular.
Okay.
Why does it existing abstractly necessitate mental content?
Okay. So if it exists abstractly as a part of an immaterial thing, the only way that could be the case is if it exists in the thoughts of that immaterial thing.
But why?
So for example, right? If we're taking like red cannot exist in another universal with no mind, like green, like because green is green and red is red. Those things are separate. They can't exist as a part of each other, right?
But those are experiences. I might be willing to agree about experiences.
Those are universals.
No, I'm saying that's irrelevant to what I'm saying. I'm saying that if you're talking at the experience of red, it seems like the experience of red isn't going to exist mind independently. But it seems like there are abstract things that at least conceivably and at least without logical impossibility could exist mind independently. So things like propositions, truthness, knowledge, I mean, stuff like that seems perfectly like equipped to exist mind independently, or I guess mind externally. I don't want to say mind independently for obvious reasons, but yeah, mind externally. So if that's the case, right, why could we not have some third option that fits into that kind of description that functions in a similar way to propositions?
So when we're discussing things like propositions, truths, things like that, those exist not materially, right? And yet we're discussing, So we're discussing things that exist materially that adopt a form for existence, right? So these things, right, these things that adopt a form for their existence, to say that they could exist as a part of each other without a mind, right? Two like immaterial things existing a part of each other without a mind would be nonsense. It'd be like saying that like the form of a statue can exist as a part of the form of a toilet. Like, no, like a toilet is and a statue is a statue. And if you combine them, it's no longer two things. Like it's whatever a toilet statue thing is. I don't even know. Like those are not two things.
I'm still just trying to find the argument. Why is mental content the only type of option that we can choose for a form of abstraction? We're just not seeing the argument for that.
Yeah, I feel like I'm giving the argument that way, in a sense that like no two immaterial things could exist as a part of each other unless there be a mind for which an immaterial thing is stored in.
Why?
Because it wouldn't make any sense for like for example, like the immaterialness of the conception of a statue to exist as a part of the immaterialness of the conception of a toilet.
Wait, okay, I don't know where you're like deriving that connection. Why are you building that connection?
This is an example of as to why it's like this is a reductio ad absurdum. It's absurd. It doesn't make any sense.
Wait, what doesn't? I don't even know where you're deriving that from. So it seems like you jumped from saying they're immaterial things. Now the conception of a toy is the conception of a bronze statue. I don't know where you got that part from. Where'd that come from?
So okay. Imagine two immaterial things, right? The conception of a statue and the conception of a toilet. In the hylomorphic account, these things can be thought of as forms, right? These are immaterial. And so if we take these two things, right? These things cannot exist, like two forms, two immaterial aspects can't exist together. Like they can't exist intrinsically to each other. That doesn't make sense because a statue is a statue and a
Why would they have to exist as each other? Where's that coming from? I don't. You keep saying that. But where's
Because
it
if
come
one
from?
thing, because if I'm establishing that a purely actual being has these things manifest in it, and so they would have to exist together. And so an immaterial thing could not have another immaterial thing manifest in it unless it has a mind for which to manifest that thing.
Wait. So you're saying a material thing could not exist within an immaterial thing? That's what you're saying?
Without a mind for which to exist in.
Wait, but that doesn't even make sense because earlier you granted that material things are capable of interactions with material things. So that's not even true on your view.
Wait, how's that relevant?
You're saying that there's no way for them to interact, but you already granted that they could interact. So that doesn't make any sense.
Wait, I was talking about two immaterial things right now. You had just brought up a material.
I asked you material and material, and then you just said yes. If that's not what you meant to say, then my bad.
Wait. Restate what you had said because I might have heard material as immaterial.
I asked you about material things existing within something immaterial, and then you said, yeah, like I'm saying that's a problem, basically. And then I said, oh, okay. And then I deferred back to the earlier part of the conversation we had. But if that's not what you're meaning to say, and then you're just simply saying two immaterial things cannot exist like as one another, I don't like. Where is that becoming like an inference?
I thought your objection was in the fact that like an immaterial thing could have another immaterial thing manifest in it without a mind. Was that not your objection?
My objection is what?
What was your objection? Not that an immaterial thing can have can be manifest in another immaterial thing without a mind.
What do you mean manifest as another material? I don't even know what that means, to be honest. Like, what does that mean to you?
Okay. Manifest, so like okay. When I
like,
say
do you mean change into something else? Like,
no. So when I say when I say a purely actual being has like all these forms manifest in it, I'm saying that it has them existing somewhere in its being.
Mm-hmm.
That's essentially what I am saying. And the place in which this thing would be manifest in would be as it would be manifested in the immaterial aspects of you or I, which is just the mind. Consciousness is consciousness seems to be immaterial. I don't know if you would agree with that. Consciousness seems to be immaterial.
I think consciousness is immaterial, sure.
Okay. So when we have these like immaterial conceptions, these are necessarily in the mind, right? And this is how I also describe these abstract forms and patterns in a purely actual being. They exist in their mind, manifest in their mind.
Wait, is your point that for these things to exist, there needs to be conceptions, which necessitates a mind? Is that your point, or what are you saying?
I'm saying that for them to exist in a god, right, in a purely actual being, they have.
I'm dispelling the notion of there being a god in the sense of some like agential entity with the like two omnis that we agreed on after the shift from like the three omnis. So I'm saying like I don't see why this being needs to be agential, and it feels like at least so far I haven't really heard a reason as to why. I mean, I don't know if anyone else feels as though they've sufficiently heard a reason, but I just can't say that I have.
So okay, you would say so. What am I meant? What are you confused on regarding what is essential? One more time, because I had kind of. I said
no, it's okay. I said, why is this entity like agential? Why does the foundational member need to be agential? And now we're like on a whole thing about like
Wait.
And now we're on a.
This seems like a very different point, though. So like
this is the whole thing I was asking. Like, why does it need to be agential in the sense of having like any sort of mind point blank period?
Agential.
Like an agent.
Agential.
Yeah.
Okay. So having any sort of mind, like when I say mind, I'm not even necessarily asserting this is a personal agent, as in expressing or anything. I'm just saying they have a mind. Like in the same way that when you were like asleep, you have a mind. Like I'm not even seeking to prove that they are expressing anything. Just that they have a mind.
And so you're saying like they have a mind because conceptions do stuff with each other. Like I don't know what the point of that.
I'm saying they have a mind. I'm saying they have a mind because they are the cause of all things, right? The purely actual being is the cause of all things.
Okay.
And so if they're the cause of all things, the forms and patterns that manifest in things must in some way be in the purely actual actualizer. And these can either exist. Okay, so in the same way that like I cannot cause something in which I do not have, I suppose. The purely actual actualizer cannot cause something in the present moment that it does not have. So it needs to be a part of the purely actual actualizer in some way.
Yeah, I don't know if I can do these definitions by example. It feels like it doesn't make it like especially less vague. Can you just give like stipulative definitions?
What do you mean necessarily by that?
So by stipulative definition, I just mean, can you give like some definition defined in terms of the characteristics of the thing being described? So like, for instance, if you were to go, well, what's a mammal? I would try and list off what the features of like a mammal are. I'd be like, okay, is capable of X, Y, and Z. Or if you were to ask me, what's a video game? I would tell you it's some sort of digital media that's capable of blah, 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 blah. Like, can I get something a little more like that? Because I feel like this kind of language so far is like, literature referential, and I don't read like old literature.
Okay, yeah. So I suppose the way I would phrase that then would be a purely actual being has all forms and patterns that manifest in all things that exist as a part of it. I guess would be the way I would phrase it in that sense. I don't know if that helps whatsoever.
Wait, say that one more time?
A purely actual being has all the forms or patterns that manifest in all things that exist as a part of it.
Like, what does that mean? So you're saying like some foundational entity has stuff inside of it?
These stuff being like the forms that manifest in everything that exists. Yeah.
So what do you mean by forms here?
Okay, so like the idea in which something takes up, right? How we differentiate between like two different things being the qualities of the thing, the essence of the thing.
Oh wait, are you arguing for essences? I don't even know if I believe in that. I definitely don't know if I grant that.
Wait. So things have I don't know if like by essence, I don't know if you think I mean like a soul or something. I'm not as arguing that.
No. Like are you referring to like platonic form types, like of like forms and like
not platonic forms, just like
something close to that, right?
Right. Everything has existence and like an essence, right? This isn't even held by like hylomorphics.
So like the chair essence and shit like that, right?
I'm not sure. I'm just like when I say essence, I'm just talking about the nature of a thing, like what a thing is.
What do you mean?
You know, so like
like a chair essence?
Like okay, so like the essence of a chair would be like the shape of the chair, the function of the chair, like the properties of the chair. Those would be like the form of a chair, the essence of it. Hello?
Wait, hold on. So chairs do have essences or no?
Yeah, they do. It's just the shape, the what was I gonna say? The function, the shape, function, properties, some properties of it. Yeah, what it is.
So what's a chair?
A chair? I mean, like,
yeah.
In what sense do you want me to define what a chair is? Like,
just tell me what you think a chair is. Like,
I think a chair is something in which you sit on to make your butt comfy or something. I don't know.
So like, if I have a really uncomfortable thing that I sit on, that's not a chair.
Oh, I guess it could be a chair. Yeah, I guess I was just kind of exaggerating, but I mean, like, it's something which you sit on and which typically has some sort of backrest. It functions.
No, I mean, like, what?
It has the shape
What's
of
at
a chair.
what's at the core of a chair, right? Because like, I'm just now at this point like disputing whether these forms of things even exist. Like, I don't know if these things even exist. I'm not convinced.
So do you think like composite objects don't exist?
What do you mean by composite object?
Like, do you think chairs don't exist?
Not really, actually. Like, I think we have things that we call chairs, but I don't think the like notion of an actual chair is a thing. So
this is what we call meteorological nihilism. It's the denial of composite objects, and this has many issues. I can get into some, but this isn't too like connected to the current topic. But like, I mean, like, maybe,
well, it seems like your view actually relies on this. I mean, we can talk about it.
If you want me to attack meteorological nihilism, I would. But it's going to be like rambling for a little bit.
Hold on, I'm not sure if I'm like in a position where I even like agree with meteorological nihilism. I'm agnostic to that. What I'm saying is, what's the proof that there is some essence of a chair?
Wait. But if you don't adhere to meteorological nihilism, then you can't then say that things don't have.
I'm asking you, what's the proof? I'm saying I'm not convinced that they exist. I'm saying I'm not convinced that they exist.
Well, for one,
because I was like, how would I even have like a complete view on that when I was literally asking you what you even meant by that like 10 seconds ago? Yeah.
So like, there's always an aporetic advantage to affirming composite objects, right? It's difficult to know what premise in an argument for meteorological nihilism or the denial of meteorological nihilism is going to be more plausible than our experience of composite objects. Like the idea that I didn't exist in 1492. So like, there's always that little advantage. You'd also have no way of explaining why composites and their constituents have different like modal properties. You have no way of explaining why gunky world.
But you're arguing against meteorological nihilism. I'm asking you, what's the proof that chairs like have an essence?
Wait. Because if meteorological nihilism is false, then composite objects exist.
Wait a second. Hold on. So wait. What is the proof? So is it just like a weird modus tollens? Are you running a modus tollens?
I'm simply asserting that meteorological nihilism is false.
So you don't have proof of the essence of like a chair, or do you?
Okay. So are you arguing specifically essence, or like this is really getting like a little bit off topic, but like, are you arguing like that an essence doesn't exist or a composite object doesn't?
I'm asking you. Like, I feel like you're trying to get me to say that I disagree, so you can run like a script. But yeah, I'm asking you, why is this the case?
Why is that composite objects or essences exist?
I asked you why the like essence of a chair exists. So you said a second ago, right? It's something close to like the platonic forms, but you don't believe in like platonic forms. We went over that already, right? So you're saying that there's some essential like chair feature, whatever. So there's something that like unifies all chairs. And so I'm asking you, what's the argument for that particular belief?
I don't even know if I would hold that. Because like what an essence is.
Wait, sorry, you like a meteorological nihilist? What? So like, hold on a second. So you
Let me finish.
Wait, hold on a second. You spoke while I was talking. You spoke while I was talking. Actually, wait, real quick. I was gonna say, at one point, you just told me, yeah, this is an issue if you don't believe in it. Then I tell you, like, I'm not sure if this is the case. Then you go, yeah, I'm actually not sure if this is the case.
This is a clarification issue. Okay. So what I had asked you, right? Do you believe composite objects exist? And that is more like pluralistic. And what I was trying to get at was that this is a more like, when we talk about the essence of an object, that's an individual thing. And so I don't think that like there's necessarily like an unifying, like I don't think I even necessarily have to prove that there is a unifying essence to all chairs. I just think that I have to prove that an individual chair has an essence of a chair, or what, not necessarily of a chair, of like what it is. It has something that it is. Like this seems like by denying that things have an essence in the terms that I'm using, you're just denying that things aren't what they are. Like,
wait, so just to clarify, you had to make an amendment because you admit that you actually agreed with the thing that I was saying that I might be in agreement with.
No, because your agreement was you had mentioned that.
Wait, just a second ago, you said you had to clarify because you actually ran down a similar thing.
Please let me finish. So,
can I just get a yes or no to that question?
Wait, you had said this isn't a yes or no question.
Is that a yes?
You had said composite objects. You are not sure if they exist. I never made that claim of uncertainty, whether or not they do or do not exist. Because
you just a second ago went, I'm not sure if I even hold that those exist.
Wait. Because you had discussed essences at that point.
Wait, where did composite objects come from? I assumed that was relevant because I said I didn't believe in like the essence of like chairs, right?
Yeah.
You brought up composite objects in response. So presumably there was something relevant about them that built some level of equivalence, which is why you try to talk about, hold on a second, which is why you try to talk about meteorological nihilism. Wait, so then why'd you bring up composite objects?
Okay,
now I'm
because
a little confused.
I was just genuinely curious because you had said that like you weren't sure if chairs exist, and I was like, wait, are you a meteorological nihilist? Because that's what that would entail. And I was just genuinely curious. And then I had said before I had gotten into my
hold on a second.
Wait. No. I'm still talking.
Wait, hold on a second. Wait, 1 second. No, several times you've interrupted me. Calm down. Wait, hold on a second. You just interrupted. Yeah,
I'm aware. I'm aware, and you told me to be quiet.
So you're gonna stop?
I'm aware, and you told me to be quiet.
Wait. You were just doing it a second ago. Wait, okay, hold on. Establish now. No more interruptions.
What is that? Sure.
Wait, are we gonna not do any? Okay, go ahead.
I pinky swear.
Go ahead.
When I was talking about meteorological nihilism, I had led up and I had said this isn't overly relevant, and then you had said, "No, I think it actually is relevant to what your argument is," and so I had kind of touched on it, but I had held that it wasn't really relevant because it's not relevant to what essence is necessarily. So that's just like a really disingenuous way to put that. But yeah, like an essence of a thing is just what the thing is. Like to deny that essences exist is just to say that things aren't what they are.
Wait a second. So what I was saying a second ago, right, was in response to you saying that there are forms that exist, there are conceptions of forms and blah, 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 blah. I asked you, do you mean something similar to platonic forms? And you said, not exactly, but, and with platonic forms, an implication that is chairs have something that transcend the others of chairs. Like there's something at the heart of the chair category that unifies all of it. It's the ultimate chair, blah, 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 right? So I'm asking, do you think there's something like that, right? Obviously, you said no, that's not what you're getting at. So then I ask, okay, but you do think there are like forms, right? Do you think there is something that is like necessarily a chair? Do you think there are things that just must be chairs categorically? And then it seemed like you were saying yes. So I push on that and I go, okay, well, if that's the case, let me just ask you about this. Like, what do you think a chair is? Because if that's the kind of like belief you have, it seems like at that point that breaks down because it seems like chairs don't have like an establishable definition. And then it seemed like you actually agreed that there wasn't like a perfect definition. Even the first definition you offered got rejected. And he admitted like, oh yeah, but that was like more so kind of a joke. But like, yeah, like, I don't know. I think there are like definitely like chairs and chairs exist. And I was like, yeah, like I think like chairs exist too. That was never in denial. I said, I'm just not sure if this category of chairs are like, or rather, if it's a legitimate thing. I'm not convinced, for instance, that it's the case that there's something unifying about all chairs. I'm not convinced that this is some natural category, some natural kind, or there's something fundamental to chairs. And that's what I was getting at. So I don't know what you're talking about. I don't even know how you got into meteorological nihilism. Like, I don't see what that had to do with what I was saying, but I guess you can elaborate on that now if you want.
Okay. Infamous had said that he might want to clarify. I'm not sure if he.
We'll let him go after. Wait, just go ahead and say what you're gonna say.
Okay. So for one, this just seems like a very big communication issue. and I don't think this is overly relevant, because if you admit that like chairs are what they are and they have an essence, that's all that's really necessary for that. But like, so like this seems like a communication issue. I don't know if you want to just move on.
Well, I'm asking like, so you're saying that part of the view that you're presenting is that there are forms, and so I'm still trying to clarify. Are you saying that there are things like fundamental chairs?
No.
Okay. So what do you mean by forms then? That's my question.
I'm saying that each individual thing has like its own essence, like of like what constitutes what the thing is, right? So like an individual, like a bronze statue, right? Like an individual bronze statue has an essence of what we would then prescribe it as to be like a statue, like what the statue itself is.
Like what the essence be?
What would the essence of the statue be? It would be essentially like its shape and its function, I suppose.
So like, okay, so that's where you're kind of going with that. Wait, so I don't see I guess I just don't see how this is like going to like tie back to there being a mind, unless you're saying the functionality is derived from like the overarching entity. But it seems like that's not what you're saying, because you were saying that you don't actually believe it's the case that this entity need be intentionally involved or anything. Like it must have a mind, right? But it doesn't seem to need to have intentional states that are operative within the world. And so I'm just operating off of that. And I'm saying that if that's the case, it doesn't seem like functions are really going to be a byproduct of that entity if that entity doesn't even need to be intentionally involved. And then not just that, but like it having certain geometric and spatiotemporal properties. I think all of that can happen without a mind. And if like functionality isn't even something that's derived from this overarching entity, right? It seems to derive from more contingent entities like us, then I don't see at what step of the equation where this entity is necessary.
Okay. So,
or rather, its mind is necessary.
Okay. So for one, that's not actually what I was saying, because this seems like we're tying it into like more of the nature of platonic forms. I don't want to straw man you. Is that kind of what you're talking about right now? Like some sort of underlying thing?
So you said that the essence here, right? Or at least I'm assuming this was relevant back to the original thing. You can just say no if it's not. But the idea that these things derive their shape and function from some particular like conception or form or whatever, I thought that was referential to the idea of like there being some mind having foundational member.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
It is because essentially, right, the idea is this: if things are going to be deriving some sort of power for their existence at any given moment, right? This isn't like the formation of the thing. It's the sustainment of the thing, right? And so if that's going to be the case, then it needs to be the case that they're deriving it from something, right? And then this something, because it is already the case that this something exists in the form that it does, it cannot be deriving it from something that leads to that form. It needs to be deriving it from that form itself, right? And so it needs to be that purely actual being from which it derives its the power for its existence from, needs to have that as a part of it. Because if it doesn't, then it has no way of granting that causal power. And so it has to have this as a part of it. Does that follow so far?
Wait, it needs to have a causal power. Why? I was like reading something.
Okay, yeah, okay. So if wait, how much did you hear from that? Because I just want to know what to clarify.
I zoned out. Yeah, I was reading something. My bad.
Yeah. So okay. So if we're talking about sustainment, right? At any particular moment, a thing needs to have an actualizer. That's what I'm arguing. And so this is not formation. So I'm going to address one possible argument, counter argument. Okay. Is that we can like they can just derive something which then leads to like another form. No, because it's sustainment at a particular moment, which means that it has to be deriving the form that it currently has, right? That power for which it has actualized its existence from needs to be derived, that it currently is actualizing. And so that's one possible objection. But if this is the case, then right, the the cup of coffee, which derives its existence from a purely actual being, necessarily needs to then have the purely actual being have this sort of existence in it, right? This ability to derive it in it, which means that the forms and patterns that the cup of coffee takes up needs to necessarily be a part of a purely actual being. But then this is everything else. This applies to literally everything, right? Which then means that they have every range of forms and patterns in their mind, or not in their mind, as a part of them, right? I don't want to just assert a mind as a part of them, right? But then this needs to be as a part of them in some way. And if we presume this purely actual being to be immaterial, then the only way in which this can be a part of them is if it is stored in their mind, because two immaterial things that are separate from each other cannot really be combined in any other way as like to be mixed or something as two like separate things. In the same way that like if you were to mix like the immaterial aspects of like red and green, you're not gonna get like red and green like separately. Then you're gonna get like the combination of them, or you just can't even get that point in terms of immaterialness, the immaterial aspects of them. And so this needs to be stored somewhere in the immaterial body, and this necessitates a mind.
Wait, so you're saying the thing that necessitates the mind is how they're being stored, and the way they're being stored is how exactly? Separately?
Well, no. It cannot be stored just like I suppose as a part of its being. It has to be stored in a mind, because two material things, like if you store them as a part of their being, they become a different being. Like in terms of like forms and patterns. And so if you want to store them coherently, they need to be stored in some sort of mind.
Oh shit. Wait, so you're saying that they're like
playing a game?
Yeah, I've been playing a game the whole time. Yeah, so you're saying that they're being like stored like didn't I literally just beat the fuck up like 7 times? Actually, get back on the game.
Bet. No, UFC 4 by the way, because I'm getting good.
Nah, that's what I thought. That's what I thought. Dude.
No,
anyways,
I'm getting good at it.
Hilarious. Anyways, yeah, I was gonna say that you're saying the way they're being stored necessitates that they're like kept separate because they'll combine. Is that what you're saying, or no? Like what exactly? I'm so confused.
Like essentially, like right, like you can't have. I'm addressing the possible counter argument that an immaterial thing could have something manifest as a part of it without a mind, right? And I'm saying that no, it's not possible. You cannot have two immaterial, like one immaterial thing manifesting another immaterial thing as a part of it without a mind for which to store it. That's what I'm saying.
Wait, why is that impossible? Or why is the alternative impossible?
Right. So let's say that like you have an immaterial thing, like what's an immaterial thing? I want to say like
truth or something.
I guess truth. Yeah. You cannot have false as a part of truth. Like that doesn't make any sense. Like so if you're trying to say that like an immaterial thing like has something manifest in it, this necessitates a mind for which to manifest that thing in.
Mm-hmm. Wait, so I just don't see why they would conjoin if like they were kept in some like abstract set.
Well, I mean, they wouldn't if that abstract set would be like what abstract set are you necessarily talking about?
Just some like random abstract realm.
Well, I'm somewhat so like if they were in some random abstract realm, then they wouldn't be as a part of the actual being, and so that wouldn't fix like that wouldn't even like doesn't even really address necessarily the point.
Well, I'm saying like okay, so what I'm saying is like for one, it seems like we can establish that they can like that we can have abstract things that exist with how the fuck he has borrowed time. We can establish that abstract things can exist without needing some like mental content, just in general, right? I think you'd be willing to grant that. How can I not knock that over? Right?
Repeat that.
You don't necessarily need a mind for like abstract things to like occupy some realm, right?
I mean, like, yes, I guess.
Wait, so you do need okay, so the abstract set does have to be a mind.
Well,
or no?
No, I had agreed with that in the sense that like, but I'm specifically talking about something purely actual, something being a part of something purely actual. Unless you want to assert that this purely actual being could be like a different realm.
Yeah, something like that. That's how I was bringing up originally, like the idea of like some weird existential factory.
I mean, if you want to say that it's I don't know if that necessarily disproves like the point that like if you want to say that's like a different realm, then sure, there would be a purely actual being in a different realm. But actually, I don't know if I would grant that because a pure actual being in the theistic sense.
So
just be like
by being, I take it that you mean like something with a mind, right?
I mean, like I'm right now. I'm just using being in the sense like something purely
like the way we use entity.
I mean,
yeah, some, something. Right. Okay. Yeah. So I'm saying that I don't see why like it couldn't be like itself like some sort of like realm, right? Like why couldn't the foundational entity we're talking about be like a realm that we get abstract predications from, which eventually lead to like weird material things, which leads to whatever we have now.
So I'm some like does a realm have any sort of causal power, causal efficacy?
Yeah.
Well, if it had, how would a realm have causal efficacy?
I don't know. It just does, I guess.
But like, okay, we can't like if we're just gonna assert like whatever we want, then like I can just assert like there doesn't need to be a hierarchical like an endpoint to the hierarchical series. It just doesn't have one. That doesn't really like we can't just like assert whatever. We have to establish.
Would you grant that it's possible, or do you think that's impossible?
I don't think a realm can have causal efficacy. No.
But do you think it's impossible? Is the question.
Well, my insinuation by saying I don't think it can have it is that no, it's not possible.
Okay, so I just don't see the logical impossibility here, right? So, like, why couldn't the realm have causal efficacy?
I feel like by you bringing up the like alternative, you would need to establish why it can. As a viable alternative, you would need to establish the viable alternative. Would you not?
We can grant that something's possible, right? On the condition that there doesn't seem to be an apparent contradiction.
I'm not sure if I would though, because like a conceptual possibility doesn't necessarily like what we conceive, right? Like
I'm talking about conceptual possibility. I'm talking about logical possibility.
Well, then you would need to establish why it is logically possible that a realm can.
There doesn't seem to be a contradiction.
Like how would a realm that has like grant causal efficacy is what I'm asking.
I'm saying like it doesn't really need a mechanism. I'm saying that it seems logically possible unless there's a contradiction presented, right? So if there's not a contradiction presented, then it does seem to suffice, at least dialectically in this case, the condition of being logically possible. And if that's the case, I don't see why we can't appeal to that.
How does it seem logically possible for like a realm to have causal efficacy to a completely like different realm?
That's not what I said. I said it seems logically possible. Or rather, it seems that this could be logically possible, right? It doesn't seem like there's a contradiction.
Well, yeah, that's what I repeated. I repeated that.
Oh, okay. My bad.
Yeah, so like...
Then it seems like, it seems like there just isn't a contradiction.
But like, so like, how would another realm impact like this realm? Like, how are you defining a realm in this sense as well? Like,
I don't know, just some like weird dimensional thingamajigly.
Well, okay, if it's a part of this universe, then I mean, no,
it's like a metaverse.
Wait, so okay, like you had said a weird dimensional thing, like time is a dimension, like in most the
time isn't like a metaverse.
Yeah, I don't know what you necessarily mean by metaverse, and I don't know how a metaverse like a different.
So you ever
something like what a
you ever heard one of the common objections to the Kalam being that like if you say for instance, the Kalam cosmological argument showcases there needing to be a cause, some people will reply, well, it could underdetermine and prove like a variety of things. It could prove like a weird metaverse. It could prove that there's some greater like thing that precedes the actual like cosmos that then like has led to the cosmos. Where's he at?
Well, that would, I mean, I feel like that's just God at that point. Being completely honest, like if that's what you're trying to, I feel like that just kind of.
It doesn't sound like that's God, at least to me. Like if it doesn't have a mind or anything, I don't see how that's God.
Well, okay, so like a greater, you had said like a great being, like
I didn't say greater being. I said some like entity or some like dimensional thing that seems to precede the cosmos. It's like the causation of the cosmos, but is itself not the cosmos, and that's like that's where the like metaverse meme comes from.
Okay, so would this metaverse, would this metaverse have these abstract objects exist concretely, like, or would they still exist abstractly?
I mean, at this point, it seems like the abstract concrete distinction doesn't really matter. So
I don't know if I would agree with that.
Well, on your definition, what would be the distinction between the two at this point?
Well, I would say that the distinction would be that they have a physical existence.
That they have what?
This has been going on. This has been going on for 3 hours, and I do have to do something tonight.
Wait, you said they how the fuck did you find that? You said they have a what?
They would probably, like, a concrete object would probably have a physical existence.
Yeah, but what does that mean?
As in, I don't know how else to explain that. They have an existence that is physically apparent.
Yeah, like, but you can also, even by your definition of like abstract, you also have a physical existence. The game of chess has like a physical existence. We already talked about that earlier, right?
I don't wait. I thought you just. I remember you distinctly saying that the game of chess does not physically exist on your table. You brought that up as it
has an indeterminate spatio-temporal location.
I don't know if I would. I don't know if I agree with that.
That's the definition I gave to you as an alternative to the one where it's lacking in material relation. And then you said that's more of what you're getting at. So if you're going back on that now, I guess I don't know what you'd be talking about.
This has been going on for 3 hours, and I do have some stuff to do tonight.
Sure. Well, I mean, before you go,
I don't know if you want to wrap this up or.
Sure. I mean, do you want to talk about this another time?
Oh yeah, we can. Yeah, if you want.
Sure. Because like I was just gonna say, like I don't know. I feel like so far I was pretty successful in this. Like I didn't know what you were saying for a long part of it, but I feel like when we finally got it down to like what exactly you were saying, like I don't know, it seemed like you could improve the logical impossibility of this kind of like weird metaverse. It seemed like you admitted that you couldn't like prove the traditional God. You right conceded that.
Wait, what?
I conceded at one point.
Wait, what? Oh, do you mean like a religious version of like an omnibenevolent God? Yeah,
I
didn't seek to prove that. Yeah, you're right. I didn't seek to prove that.
No, I mean like at the beginning we established the three omnis as like our definition of God.
Oh yeah.
And then you agreed that you wanted to change that. And that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll concede that. I did not prove an omnibenevolent anything. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know, we could talk about this argument more if you want, like whenever. But
sure.
Yeah, I felt like a metaverse alternative wouldn't have been like that crazy, and I just never saw that being as logically impossible. Vauder was actually asking this in the chat, but I didn't want to appeal to him because, like, you know, obviously it would seem lame. But he was saying, he was saying in the chat earlier, like, yeah, it doesn't seem like there's a logical impossibility. Like, just saying something seems deeply implausible or profoundly implausible doesn't actually entail that it's impossible. And that's what I was saying here, like something seeming really weird or mechanistically absurd or whatever, like none of that entails impossibility, right? So, I mean, like, given the fact that this like metaverse alternative, at least as far as I could tell, was possible within the dialectic, in virtue of the fact that it was never disproven as like being logically impossible, I just don't see why I couldn't like appeal to this still, right? It seems like we could totally appeal to this, and this just undermines the argument as proof of God.
We can talk about this another time.
Yeah, that's fine.
Toda, are you gonna end the stream? Or? All right. Tell me when you end.
Or actually, get Slater in here. Slater was talking shit. You seem nice.
You guys were talking.
Get performative too.
He wasn't talking.
Yo,
fuck
you shut the
performative.
fuck up, you disabled
Oh,
autistic.
wait, hold on, is it-
Yo, Biz, don't end the stream. Hold on a second. Yeah, I just wanted to say, Nathan, I appreciate you not being rude. I know we were like talking over each other at one point. I appreciate you not being rude. Yeah. But no, that happens all the time, so it's okay. But no, I thought you were gonna be rude, so I was like, oh my god, this guy's fucking rude. I'm gonna get upset, like because the guys in that other server were like threatening to ban my friend for, as far as I could tell, no reason. And then I said, yeah, if you guys ban him, I'm gonna leave. And then they didn't even like go, okay, like fuck you. They like banned me immediately. I was like, what the fuck? Like, okay, assholes.
Wait, Toda, is this server? Is the live stream ended?
Theirs did. I think ours is on still.
Wait, Toda, is the live stream still on then?
So are you gonna talk shit?
Me? No. Okay, like I had
That's how he keeps asking.
Wait. I watched the debate with Amaya, right? They had with Perform, and I was like, oh, this guy's pretty good faith, so I'm not going to be an asshole. So that's kind of what I.
How do you think the debate went? What were your opinions of the debate?
With you and Performative?
No,